Guten Morgen. What is up, fine people of the internet? Welcome to the ASTROLABE, brought to you by King Pilled. It is Friday, August 16th. Almost the end of the week. I got to drive a Tesla this morning for the first time, and I like it. It's fun. It's definitely a bit of a learning curve. It takes a little bit of getting used to the regenerative braking thing. Is kind of a little weird. But it kind of makes you drive a little more aggressively because it brakes so hard as you're coming into a stop that you can get away with just naturally pushing it a little bit more. It's pretty cool. I needed to rent a car to drive up because my wife needs a car here, needs the pickup here while I'm gone for the weekend, driving up to Oklahoma City to pick up my little sister, and needed to rent a car. And I was checking the prices, and then I did a little figuring, and based on with the route that I'm taking, there's plenty of chargers along the way. And so it's actually going to be cheaper to rent a 2024 Tesla 3 and drive it there and back than it would be to get like a Camry or something like that. Or it's basically about the same price. And so since it's the same price, I was like, hey, what the hell? Might as well do the Tesla thing. I want to get this experience. I've never driven. I don't think I've ever driven an electric car, and definitely haven't driven a Tesla. And I'm inclined to be a Tesla fan because of Elon, obviously. So I guess your little sis ain't so little since your wife needed a truck to pick her up. No, I'm the one who's going and picking her up. My wife needs the only vehicle we have is the pickup, and she's got to do some errands while I'm gone. Yeah, the rental experience is pretty wild. I'm doing it on Turo. This is the first time I've used Turo. And just a reminder of how much easier our life is because of all of these technologies that we like to stigmatize. I reserved it via Turo. I gave him, confirmed my identity, sent him a picture of myself, my driver's license, and then reserved the whole thing remotely. Drove up there. There's just a parking lot that's got a bunch of Teslas in it, and I identify it based on the license plate, take a bunch of pictures of it inside and out, and then they send me an app that has the key, so I unlock it and start it with the app, and then and that's the only key that I use. And then for charging it, I use the same app, and it just takes a little deposit, and then you just charge everything just automatically when you go to charge. So it's a pretty fun little experience. I think it's the old days of like, oh, you got to go down into some janky strip mall and they've got some busted up looking little office area. You go in and you got to sit there while they print off a bunch of papers and you got to sign your life away. And I mean, I'm still signing my life away, but I don't have to sit there and do it on a bunch of old shitty printer paper and deal with the plebs. I just drove up to a parking lot, grabbed the car, took off. It was living in the future. It's great. Do me a favor, hit the like button on your way in, and we're going to get rocking and rolling. We're going to start this the only way, the best way. We're playing it again.
When they took a shot at my hero, and they tried to kill the next president of the United States, enough was enough, and I said, let Trumpomania run wild, brother. Let Trumpomania rule again. Let Trumpomania make America great again.
Run up, Roman. All right. Now that I've got you guys nice and hyped, here's something. This is an even bigger thing. Like, you guys will get this. I don't know if the ladies, the couple ladies we've got in here, Kate, you'll have to let me know. I don't know if you guys will quite get this. If this will hit your soul the way that it does the guys. But check this guy out. What an absolute monster this guy is.
What's up, Stick Nation? Today, I don't even think I have to explain this. This is kind of a railgun-esque, or it could even be like a minigun. I mean, like, you know, if you look behind me, there's a bridge. You can imagine my friend's family and favorite high school teacher are boarding a helicopter across this bridge. I've got to take out all the enemies in a heroic last stand to save my loved ones. Like, that's the kind of stick this is, which is why, in my opinion, it's just, it's an all-around great stick. I'm not gonna lie to you. I mean, 10 out of 10. What's up?
The only downside of this video is the music sucks. I don't need, like, I don't know, Zelda music playing while I'm, oh, good. My license was just confirmed. I'm set to drive, so I can complete check-in when I get to the car that's sitting in my driveway right now. Yeah, this video needs to be redone with better music. It needs to have, like the last clip, something along those lines. You gotta have something epic from some sort of epic, uber-masculine war movie. That's the only thing that would make this video better. Javier said, wait, even after all the grifting, you only have one vehicle? You should each have Bugattis by now. Isn't that how the grift works? Yeah, I guess I'm not a very good grifter. Maybe I need to grift harder. Is that the answer? Just grift a little harder? Hey, if you guys want to contribute to our Bugatti fund, you can send a super chat, or you can become a channel member, the King Pilled, or the best way you can support the show and ensure that we get to our Bugatti status is by going to kingpill.com and joining the private King Pill community, the King Pill Discord. We got a couple Discord members here in the chat. We got Kate. Kate's here. We got Euthanasia. I need to work on my Nigerian accent. All right. Now I think you guys are probably going to find this is going to be, let's say, it's going to make you feel torn. You're not going to be sure whether to like this or not like this. My wife wants you to grift her a 4Runner. A King Pilled shirt. Actually, it's funny that you mentioned that. There may be something along those lines coming here very soon. Maybe. Rumor has it. So Sam Hyde has an important announcement. Do you guys have any idea what it might be? This is very important news. Groundbreaking. Earth-shaking.
Hey everyone, it's AJ.
And the Rizzler.
Just look at that Riz face. And we are here to give a shout out to the upcoming podcast, The Perfect Guy Life, or PGL.
We cannot wait to listen to
The new podcast and give it a big boom! So let's see it one more time for the podcast, PGL. And Big Justice, before the episode, the first episode, we better get over to Costco and get us and a big nobody. And one more time before we get out of here, Big Justice. 3, 2, 1.
The Perfect Guy Life podcast. I guess I know what I'm going to be listening to now when I'm driving up to Oklahoma City. This is great. You guys know it. I love these guys. I can't get enough of them. Maybe it just takes me back to the old days of the internet when most of the quote unquote viral content was just kind of, I don't know, empty, vapid, just people having fun, making silly stuff. It makes me sentimental. And then you got a dad and his kid. And I don't know the relationship of the Rizzler. Rizzler's easily the best of them all. There was one yesterday I watched where they're doing that thing where they have the 2 layers of drinks and there's 5 drinks, so they got to get them in the right order. And it was great. The Rizzler was the one who was consistently on the mark, getting closer and getting closer. Big Justice kept fucking everything up. And then Big Justice makes one observation at the very end. They have 3 correct. They just need to swap 2 of them. He makes one observation and then he gets all the credit for it. The drama is real, folks. If you guys aren't following the Costco guys, I don't know what you're doing with your life. Oh, what are people saying in here? Javier says to my wife, if you're adventurous, look into JDM cars. You can buy 4Runners and Land Cruisers from Japan. Right-hand drive, though. Man, a right-hand drive Land Cruiser would be incredible. I would absolutely drive the hell out of a right-hand drive Land Cruiser. Okay, funny little response from our Lord Elon. So people are going crazy with the AI edits now, And this one's a little disturbing. Very uncanny valley. The best part of it, though, is Elon's being a good sport. He says, well, if I live by the sword, I should die by the sword. Imagine posting something like this on Twitter and then having Elon reply to it. Him looking like a really creepy, weird, pregnant tranny thing, and has you get a reply from Elon. The wealthiest man in the world is shit posting on Twitter. What a time we live in. Okay, another good clip here from Trump yesterday. A real reporter just asked Trump the greatest question ever.
Thank you, President Trump. You've spoken very passionately about how God saved your life, and I'm wondering, have you put much thought into why God saved your life? As in, for what purpose has he been shielding and protecting you?
Okay, I don't know if you're wearing headphones, the single channel only thing is dizzying. So I apologize for this. I wasn't wearing headphones when I saved this earlier, so I didn't pick up on that. But let's speed this up just a wee bit.
So I don't know if you heard the question. You've spoken about God saving your life. That I've spoken passionately about it, and something happened because that was a miracle. I never looked that way. The audience was massive, and it was in front of me. I never have that particular graph. That was a graph on, as you all know now, that it's very, I think everyone knows it very well, but it showed the great numbers on illegal immigration. It was the lowest point we've ever had. And it was one that I use less than 20% of the time. It's always at the end of the speech, not at the beginning of the speech. And it's always on the...
It's interesting. He says less than 20% of the time. He has an actual number for how often he uses that graph. And it's planned. It's typically at the end of the speech. He doesn't do it at the beginning. He never looks around that way in the when he's doing the speeches. He's always just looking at the crowd. So he's identifying all these little things that were kind of weird, random changes that they made at the last second that played a role in the actual outcome.
Left side, not the right side. And yet, for some reason, I called it. It's not on a teleprompter. I do things largely without a teleprompter, frankly, because it's hard to hold an audience if you're going to go for an hour and a half or 2 hours reading a script. And I just talked about it, and I moved to my right, turned sharply to my right, ping. And if I didn't do that, I'm not here with you. So, yeah, God had something to do with it. It's a miracle, and God had something to do with it. And maybe it's we want to save the world. This world is going down. This world is going down. So it could be. But I believe that. I believe that. My sons are very good shooters. They're like scratch golfers, better, relatively speaking, with shooters, great shooters. And Eric and Don both told me from 130 yards. I said, well, that's pretty far away, isn't it? They said, no, that's like a 1-foot putt with, weapons like the one being used. Plus, he was a good shooter. This guy was a good shooter. He went to the range and shot a lot, and he was supposed to be a pretty good shooter. They said a bad shooter would hit the target almost 100% of the time. So something happened. And I have to say the Secret Service sniper did an amazing job.
It's great that he keeps giving credit to the Secret Service sniper because it makes him look very magnanimous, and it plays along with the law enforcement and military, and it's something that only Trump would do. Only Trump would be that way. Okay, we've got some crazy breaking news that just dropped. This is I'm kind of spurging out right now. The only within I think this little circle of the internet would people realize how big of a deal this is. But Joe Rogan, according to Shane Seward in the chat, Joe Rogan just dropped a pod with Peter Thiel. And sure enough, I just saw that while we were watching this video, and my heart skipped a beat. Sure enough, 1 minute ago, Joe Rogan Experience, episode 2190 with Peter Thiel. This is fascinating. That is calculated. That is calculated from Thiel's side at the very least. Rogan's probably, hey, cool, get a Peter Thiel interview. Now, obviously, this is related to the Vance decision, but man, now I can't wait to hit the road. I know exactly what I'm listening to first. This is going to be great. I wonder if there's going to be some real nuggets in there. I mean, Peter Thiel is never not interesting, but he also generally tries to stay away from getting really into the hot button issues. He's a very private man. He's not trying to he's kind of generally trying to stay out of the limelight. And a lot of people criticize him with particular issues come up, and he'll give kind of stutters and just gives an answer. And then they think that this answer like stands for what he believes. And there's like nothing about his body language or anything that says like he's obviously giving you whatever answer you need to stop talking about that subject because he doesn't want to talk about it. And you can read a lot into that. But Chris Young is gonna go to the interview now. I don't blame you guys. My viewership should be dropping off quickly now because there's something much better out there to watch now. I haven't listened to Joe Rogan in a very long time, but I'll be listening to this one. I hope it doesn't disappoint. I hope it doesn't become just kind of a general bunch of fluff. I hope they get into some good stuff. Speaking of Trump, we've talked about the campaign here and how there's this AstroTurf narrative about how the campaign sucks. And I read this thread to you guys a few days ago from James Blair, USA, who's the political director of the Trump 2024 campaign in RNC. He says, quick updates. We've cleared 14,500 Trump Force 47 captains. This is the Force 47, Trump Force 47. 14,500 Trump Force 47 captains trained across the battleground states. More than 2,500 trained in the last week, plus increased training capacity daily. And Clark County, Nevada, and Las Vegas was finally forced to clean the voter rolls last week. There's lots of this stuff dropping all the time. There's all kinds of things happening. The campaign is working the ground game hard. They're doing basically everything right. I don't have a single complaint about how they've approached things so far. But the vast majority of it doesn't get covered. People don't talk about it. Of course, the media is not going to cover it, but even the alt media isn't really covering it. The new mainstream media, which is probably better, honestly, because it means this stuff is happening mostly behind the scenes, mostly in private. I'm sure there's plenty of it. It's easy for someone who wants to know, but there isn't this steady drumbeat happening that, hey, the RNC, the Trump campaign, really, with the RNC as its proxy, is building out a pretty massive ground game. There's a lot of lawfare happening. All the messaging is all on point, and they're all driving toward one end, but it has the appearance of being more kind of distributed, and it's not this big, focused media blitz, which isn't necessary. The other thing about, I believe, why they're dialed back on really going ham on Kamala right now is because the DNC hasn't happened yet. There's no point in completely blowing your wad, hitting everything, all the hot button issues, just really going after it. There's no point in doing that, 2.5 months, 3 months, however long it is. 2.5 months. Yeah, 2.5 months. 2.5 months out from the election. There's no point blowing your wad right now if you don't even know for sure that she's actually going to be the candidate. Or if Walz is going to be her VP. You don't even know exactly what the ticket is going to be yet. And the best thing possible right now is for them to get out and make all the bad headlines for themselves. Let it all build up. And then when it really matters in the home stretch, then you can start really going ham. It's like, people are so desperate to draw black pills out of anything. They're so desperately looking for doom to try to reconfirm their priors that there's no critical thought or anything. Everything is just emotional reactivity. Trump campaign's doing great. And all this hullabaloo about it right now, we've seen how quickly things have changed. And think about what's happened over the last month, say month and a half, 6 weeks, since the debate against Biden to today. We're in a completely different world. So what's going to happen over the next 2.5 months? Anything can happen. Nobody's going to remember this conversation. I probably shouldn't even weigh in on it because this is like making it super not timely. Not like the ASTROLABE is for people to really come back and listen to later on, but yeah, it's I get frustrated. Speaking of communists, Bernie Sanders unexpectedly gets why people like Donald Trump. Bernie Sanders talking to Theo Von. This is another one. I've got a 7-hour drive today, so this is another one that I've got bookmarked just for the spectacle of listening to Theo Von having a conversation with Bernie Sanders. The two characters, the way that Theo tries to talk about things, Bernie's like absolute humorlessness. This is going to be a great listen. But here's a little 1-minute preview of it.
Do you see why people like him?
I do. You know, because he's very disarming. He gets up there and he says whatever the hell he wants.
Yeah.
He is not
Yeah, he doesn't seem like he's by the book. That was a thing.
He is not by the book.
Right. And so that's something the same as you. It's like he's speaking for, it feels like they're speaking for themselves, right? Whether you agree with maybe what they believe what they're saying. And that, I think, comes through.
I think you're right.
Clearly to people.
I think, he's certainly unusual. Gets up there and he rants and he does his thing, and he's not necessarily, I'm sure his advisors go crazy, but he's not reading, not reading off, he doesn't have 14.
Kid Rock is one of his advisors, And look, I love Kid Rock, but I don't know if every advice, every advice of his is the best, but now some of it is, that's for sure, but some of it may not.
You're right.
Be.
And a lot of these politicians have 18 different consultants. You can't use that word. You can't say that. And he's
that
not
makes
like
it miserable. He's not like that, right?
And people find that appealing. I get it.
There goes the butt. The Bernie Bro to Bernie Bro to MAGA Bro pipeline is pretty well trodden at this point. I just checked that video has 1.1 million views. It was posted 2 days ago. This is going out to a lot of people. This is the media. Guys like Theo Von, Tucker Carlson, Sean Ryan, Joe Rogan. That's the media. Those are the guys who are getting the numbers. This is gives me an opportunity to shout out the Tucker Carlson Theo Von interview. In fact, if I run out of stuff to listen to on my way there or back, then I'm going to listen to that again. The chemistry they have is phenomenal. I would listen to a podcast of Tucker Carlson and Theo Von that posted regularly of them just bullshitting about anything. They cover all sorts of ground. They're both equally ADHD. They have great chemistry together. It's very, very good. I strongly recommend going out and listening to that. All right. Another good one would be Tucker posted just recently. He posted a review video of the Cybertruck. They got a Cybertruck out there in Maine, out in the boonies in Maine where he is, and he drives around with a couple of his neighbors' friends. One of the guys was spent 15 or 20 years in prison for marijuana or something like that, and he's just a total gearhead, living out in the woods with a bunch of old cars and got a massive, massive barn full of all sorts of things. It's great seeing Tucker in that environment. He's very natural in that. He's honestly more natural in that environment than he is in the DC environment. But yeah, that's a very, very good one. My wife is a big Theo Von fan. Euthanasia says it took me 6 hours to get to Mississippi, and it takes you 7 to get to. Okay, yeah, right. Texas is large. Okay, so speaking of Trump's pivot to cost of living, so Kamala Harris has now proposed a $6,000 tax credit for new parents. And I'm old enough to remember 48 or 72 hours ago when the media, as Ryan Jerdusky here says, J.D. Vance, we should have a $5,000 tax credit for new parents. The media, he's working against childless Americans. 4 days later, Kamala Harris, let's do $6,000. The media, she's incredible. Elon, signal boosting. Boop. Same with the tax on tips. This is a white pill. This is the Harris campaign having no policies. There's not a policy campaign, which actually matters to enough people. Largely, it's a vibes thing. The vibes are what are going to carry it. But her having zero policy platform, if you go to her website right now, there's a donation link and no policy breakdown. No, nothing. It's literally just a landing page for donations. Or at least it was as of a couple of days ago. I haven't looked at it in a few days. I'm not exactly sitting here hitting F5 on Kamala Harris's website. But the campaign is entirely reactive. All they can do is just kind of some weird shit posting and hosting very strange Zoom calls and then reacting to whatever policies that Trump puts forth that they can possibly skew in a direction that's going to be favorable to their base. And you can tell the base that they're targeting is urban. They're targeting the people who are going to vote for them anyways. So they're really just trying to consolidate their base. They're not really trying to reach outside of it at all. But this is a microcosm of the larger pattern here, where the regime is being forced across a bunch of different domains to begin embracing various different populist measures. Just by the only way that they can stay alive, the only way that they can try to keep themselves afloat for a little bit longer and buy themselves a little bit more time is by satiating the voters and beginning to give them some of the things that they want. They're shitty at it. These are empty promises, but it begins with rhetoric. The rhetoric normalizes it. Then you just want to have a competent party that can take it and run with it and actually do something about it. And that's the dynamic that's building here. So another white pill. There's no fucking black pilling here. It's all white pills. On a related story, Neocon Central here. Obama economist Jason Furman gives the game away in the New York Times when he says the Harris proposals are awful, so hopefully they won't matter. Quote, "This is not sensible policy, and I think the biggest hope is that it ends up being a lot of rhetoric and no reality." And this is from the Washington Post, has an article here that we're going to read through, an opinion piece. When your opponent calls you a communist, maybe don't propose price controls. This is related to this. She's trying to piece together a little policy platform here because she doesn't have one. So she's trying to figure one out on the fly. And even the Washington Post isn't having it. It's hard to exaggerate how bad Kamala Harris's price gouging proposal is. This is from Catherine Rampell. Looks kind of young. Let's take a look at Catherine Rampell here real quick. Opinion columnist of the Washington Post, she frequently covers economics, public policy, immigration, and politics with a special emphasis on data-driven journalism. An economic and political commentator for CNN, a special correspondent for the PBS NewsHour, and a contributor to Marketplace. Before joining the Post, she wrote about economics and theater, for the New York Times. She received the 2021 Online Journalism Award for commentary and the 2010 Weidenbaum Center Award for evidence-based journalism. And she's a 6-time Gerald Loeb Award finalist. So, not exactly a rabid far-right winger. Price gouging is the focus of Vice President Kamala Harris's economic agenda, her presidential campaign says. She'll crack down on excessive prices and excessive corporate profits, particularly for groceries. So what level counts as excessive, you might ask? TBD, but Harris will ban it. That's the thing about price gouging. As has been said of hardcore pornography, you know it when you see it. It's not hard to figure out where this proposal came from. Voters want to blame someone for high grocery bills, and the presidential candidates have apparently decided the choices are either the Biden administration or corporate greed. Harris has chosen the latter. In a news release Wednesday, her campaign said the first 100 days of her presidency would include the, quote, first ever federal ban on price gouging on food and groceries, setting clear rules of the road to make clear that big corporations can't unfairly exploit consumers to run up excessive corporate profits on food and groceries. This is like, along the lines of taxing unrealized capital gains, this is a nuclear option sort of policy from a campaign perspective. This is the sort of thing that even gets the lukewarm, mushy centrists real riled up, because they've seen this playbook, and it doesn't take a 120 IQ to put the pieces together here. That if you take super low margin essentials and throw price controls on them, you're like 18 months away from famine. These are the kinds of things this is why people are talking about this election as it's old, but it's the most important election of our lifetime. Well, in this case, it actually probably is. You know, there's this funny thing, and I'll make a sports ball reference here. In sports, there's this phrase that people often use, a must-win game. This is a must-win game. And there's a variety of reasons for that. Sometimes it's like for narrative reasons, or because it's the particular opponent, or, you know, you need to get the will up in the locker room, or there's various different reasons why there's must-win games. This is a must-win game. But it turns out that some must-win games are actually must-win. Like once you get to the playoffs, or if it's the last game of the season and the only way you're going to get to the playoffs is if you win, that is an actual must-win game. In this case, this election is the actual most important election of our lifetime. Yes, it would be great to get to where elections aren't important and they don't matter. We don't have to worry about whether it's important or not. We're headed in that direction, manage democracy and such. But in this particular case, things like price gouging, like federal bans on price gouging and taxing unrealized capital gains these are just like, oh man, that's really going to make things kind of suck. It would be better to not do that. These are existential types of risks that can result in massive death and destruction and catastrophe in a very short period of time. It's not even like, oh man, this is going to suck for the next 4 years, but we got to get to, the next election, and then it'll be the most important, and we can vote them out. No, there's no getting to the next election and voting them out. With these sorts of policies, the U.S. ceases to exist as an entity. And doesn't need to be a black pill, because it just means that we're going to take the accelerationist approach. We're just going to speed run it. We're going to rip that Band-Aid off fast. And it's going to hurt like a bitch, but it means we're not going to have the long, protracted, like gutting, just being slowly bled out from a gut shot or something. We're not going to get that. Like I said in the last episode, we've got we had a dry run for, I think, what would be the sort of response we would have in the event of a DNC election victory. And that was the Texas border dispute. There's already the narrative laid in place, the history, the precedent for Republican states to begin just joining together and saying, nope, federal government can go kick rocks. We're not going to do that. Texas, obviously, and Florida would be the ones leading the way. And that narrative, that lays out my prediction of Texas becoming the new capital of the American empire. And it would probably happen even quicker with that route. Because really what a Trump election would be, I was listening to Academic Agent on Benjamin Boyce yesterday, and he was talking about how the way he sees it, he says, he thinks the regime wants Trump and that they're trying to get Trump elected. I think what he's seeing is he's recognizing that there are members of the elite classes who have thrown themselves behind Trump, which is very obvious. But this is not the regime. It's a new regime. This new regime has a lot of overlap with the old regime, and it shares many of the same priors, but it has very different goals. And it's willing to do very different things to achieve those goals. But it has to operate, there has to be a perception of continuation to maintain the legitimacy of the regime. It can't look like it's just a straight up regime change operation. So it has to be very carefully managed. Where I do agree with him, though, is that a Trump election represents a more protracted drawdown. It's not solving the problems. It's buying us time to solve the problems. The problems are still going to be in there. And in fact, having Trump elected is going to give them a lot of cover. The point he makes is that you're going to get the democracy believers are going to be restored in their faith. Well, like the boomer type democracy believers will be restored in their faith in the system. Oh, okay, it's okay. We almost got there, but it wasn't too bad. We managed to pull out of the dive at the last second. So we could still believe and trust in the system. But I don't think that's even necessarily a bad thing. Even if you grant it's true, I don't think it's a bad thing. Because we're not remotely situated to manage a situation where everybody just stops trusting in every major institution at the same time. The level of chaos and disorder and carnage and strife that would bring, we're not equipped to manage that. We need to get to where we can be equipped to manage that. So this is why I believe we see a Trump election here. And we probably see, I would say probably for the next 3 presidential administrations, we're going to see derivations of Trump. We're going to see Trump 2024 to 2028, and then probably Vance or someone like that. This would be how I would predict it. Obviously, tons of things can change. But if I was to hold a gun to my head and make me make a prediction now, I'd say probably the next 12 to 16 years, somewhere in there, is going to be the Republican Party as the inner party and the Democrats as the outer party. And it's going to be papering over some of the festering wounds underneath, and those festering wounds are going to fester even more. They're going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then eventually become they're going to go septic, and the body is going to die. Our goal is to raise up a new body in that meantime, so that when the real shit hits the fan, something like 20-ish years or so from now, then at that point, we can navigate through that crisis and then head on the upswing. So I think we're going to get an upswing. and we're going to be building, and there's going to be a big, bunch of positive sentiment and everything. But it's going to be decades from now before we get the real shit hits the fan moment. That's my prediction. Anyways, let's get back to reading this. First ever federal ban on price gouging on food and groceries, setting clear rules of the road to make clear that big corporations can't unfairly exploit consumers to run up excessive corporate profits on food and groceries. What are these clear rules of the road, or the thresholds that determine when a price or profit level becomes excessive? The memo doesn't say, and the campaign did not answer questions I sent seeking clarification. The most likely template for Harris's proposal is a recent bill from Senator Elizabeth Warren. Harris co-sponsored similar legislation with Warren in 2020 when Harris was a senator. Warren's bill would ban any, quote, grossly excessive price, end quote, during any, quote, atypical disruption, end quote, of a market. Alas, no definition was provided for these terms either. Rather, the bill would empower the Federal Trade Commission to enforce bans using any metric it deems appropriate. And here you see exactly how the administrative state operates. You create some vague legislation pointing in sort of a general direction, and then you empower one of the permanent federal bureaucracies to actually legislate and actually put the teeth on it, actually get the details and enforce it. And then, of course, the Federal Trade Commission is going to be informed by NGOs and research partners and nonprofits that will do studies and write white papers, and then they'll use those as their justification for whatever it is. And those NGOs and nonprofits will all be funded by people like George Soros or what was the guy's name? Hans Jörg Wyss or something like that, big Swiss billionaire. This is the way the sausage is made. It's hard to exaggerate how bad this policy is. It is, in all but name, a sweeping set of government-enforced price controls across every industry, not only food. Supply and demand would no longer determine prices or profit levels, far off Washington bureaucrats would. The FTC would be able to tell, say, a Kroger in Ohio the acceptable price it can charge for milk. At best, this would lead to shortages, black markets, and hoarding, among other distortions seen previous times countries tried to limit price growth by fiat. There's a reason narrower price gouging laws that exist in some U.S. states are rarely invoked. At worst, it might accidentally raise prices. Of course it would. That's because, among other things, the legislation would ban companies for offering lower prices to a big customer, such as Costco, than to Joe's Corner Store, which means quantity discounts are in trouble. Worse, it would require public companies to publish detailed internal data about costs, margins, contracts, and their future pricing strategies. Posting cost and pricing plans publicly is a fantastic way for companies to collude to keep prices higher, all facilitated by the government. The boomers who have been worrying about communism for a long time, they're being vindicated here. This is like going after the kulaks. Normally, the government doesn't like collusion. In fact, the Harris campaign's statement about her anti-price gouging agenda highlights a case she won as California Attorney General against companies colluding to fix prices for LCD flat screens. Presidential administrations of both parties have similarly pursued cases against cartels and other anti-competitive conduct. That's because price fixing is already illegal, and it should be. It's important to distinguish between real cartel behavior, whether among TV makers or meat packers, versus temporary spikes in prices and profits due to high demand or supply chain disruptions. Harris's economic advisors are either too confused or lazy, and I will add, or evil, to tell the difference. They don't seem to know the history of these kinds of policies and apparently haven't thought very hard about what would make markets more competitive or improve the lives of voters, or they don't care. They don't even seem terribly familiar with what's happening to grocery prices, where the battle against inflation has, believe it or not, pretty much already been won. Grocery price inflation has come way down since it surged in 2022. Yeah, I don't buy this. Just source, me. On Wednesday, a government report showed that grocery prices in July were up a measly 1% from last year, as the White House itself touted. Indeed, annual grocery price inflation has hovered around that level for the past 8 months, way down from the double-digit inflation in mid-2022. See, the thing about this, if you're just measuring inflation, inflation is down. Well, inflation is a moving number. So you're saying the number isn't moving up as fast, but it's not moving down. So if you had a big whoosh, sharp move up, and it's not going up as fast anymore. Well, yeah, but it still went way up, and it's still really high. Additionally, profit margins for supermarkets are notoriously thin. Despite Harris's and Warren's accusations about excessive corporate profits, those margins remained relatively meager even when prices surged. The grocery industry's net profit margins peaked at 3% in 2020, falling to 1.6% last year. Imagine running a business on 1.6% profit margins. If that sounds high, note that the average net profit margin, what's left over after expenses, for all public companies nationwide is 8%. So what actually happened with grocery inflation if not price gouging, however defined? Super strong consumer demand plus major supply disruptions, the coronavirus pandemic, bird flu, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, etc., pushed prices and profits up. Once those shocks abated and consumers started spending down their pandemic savings, price growth cooled. These are the kinds of facts the Harris campaign should be explaining to consumers, not exploiting for demagogic gain because push polling suggests people are mad about greed. But more to the point, if your opponent claims you're a communist, maybe don't start with an economic agenda that can accurately be labeled as federal price controls. We already have plenty of economic gibberish coming from the Republican presidential ticket. Do we really need more from the other side too? So, this is from the Washington Post. How are you possibly blackpilling? Yes, Mr. Anxiety Flapper says, acceleration is near zero. The velocity is constant. It's really high. Indeed. Let me check some of the other comments here. Yeah, DC Woodworking, this would be as bad as taxing unrealized capital gains. And these are the sorts of things, like, honestly, it's kind of a white pill that they're producing this sort of propaganda against themselves. Because, like I said, even the kind of squishy moderates see this and they're like, holy shit, are you out of your mind? Even they can recognize this as like an existential thing. And, they might be like, oh, well, we'll just get it. Hopefully they don't actually mean it because that Trump guy is really bad. But this just makes Trump look better and better to the squishy moderate independent. Speaking of the Kamala campaign, we've got a Dom Lucre here, a professional trafficker and slop. He actually highlighted this video, which is pretty funny. I've been aware of Dr. Umar for a while now, and he's something that I would only ever experience because of the internet, and it's quite a spectacle. If you don't know who Dr. Umar is, you're missing out. Breaking news: civil rights activist Dr. Umar Rashad Ibn, I have no idea how I pronounce that, Abdullah Johnson, announced that Kamala Harris's team offered him $10,000 for an interview with Kamala Harris. Dr. Umar also uploaded text messages proving his claim and says Kamala Harris's team is also paying Ricky Smiley, Steve Harvey, and other celebrities to shame black people into voting for Kamala Harris. My post before this one exposed how Essence magazine openly spoke about how they use propaganda to manipulate black people. The truth has never been more clear than today.
Black vote ain't for sale no more. Black vote ain't for sale. We bartering on business. We standing on business. Bring us some tangibles or get out of my face. Ricky Smiley, I love you. But crying on the radio for Kamala Harris, my brother, that's an all-time low. Don't do that again, Ricky Smiley. Don't you get on your radio show and cry for Kamala. Don't you do that, my brother. If you want to cry for Kamala Harris, you do that in the privacy of your house. But if we're going to be honest, Steve Harvey and Ricky Smiley, and I love you both, no hate to my big brothers, but if we're going to be honest, Ricky Smiley and Steve Harvey, y'all only carried on because y'all got paid to carry on. Can we please be honest? Can we see? I want y'all to understand, overstand, and understand what King Kong is talking about. Y'all carry
understand, overstand, and understand.
Carried on because y'all got paid to carry on. Kamala Harris and the Democratic plantation is paying you celebrities, paying you to shame black people into voting. Y'all know we not going to get nothing out of that vote. Y'all know we not going to get nothing out of that vote. Y'all know we not going to get nothing out of the vote, but they being paid. Y'all being bought. They offered me $10K for an interview with Kamala Harris. I don't want your money, but we can definitely do the interview. They offered me $10K for an interview with Kamala Harris. Yes, we can do the interview. Keep your damn money. King Kong consciousness ain't for sale. I'm one of the
King Kong consciousness.
real ones. Silverback Garvey Gorilla. I'm one of the real ones. Silverback Garvey Gorilla. Don't come to me with no propositions for money. I don't live for no money. I'm not one of these goofy ass rappers whose whole life is nothing but what you can buy and own. You dealing with real African DNA. This is real ancestral energy over here. I'm not no Ricky Smiley and Steve Harvey. You don't drop no check off and say, get the Negroes to the plantation on November the 4th. You don't drop no check off and say, get the Negroes to the plantation.
Jay Fort says, this guy is great. Yeah. It's like a guilty pleasure of mine. He's just entertaining to just sit and watch and listen to. You get the best quotes out of him. And he has this thing you probably noticed where he repeats things 3 times. He has periodic lines that he repeats them 3 times. The man has a very, very captive audience. He's got something like 200,000 followers on Twitter, and he is revered. And the shit libs go absolutely fucking like pants on head enraged about him. They cannot stand him. They absolutely hate his guts. You want to see a shit lib get race realist real fast? Have him listen to a Dr. Umar video. Subconscious Trinity mirroring. Ooh, interesting. Yeah, he's absolutely nuts. Just completely bonkers. And he's very good at branding. I mean, he's some dude. He calls himself he's like Pan-Africanist, and he's like presents himself as a professor and everything. And maybe he was I think he probably like taught elementary school or something like that. So he's an educator. He's a professor. And his early videos were all him like going out to like a playground and setting up the camera on like the playground structure, and then just standing there and like, you know, he's just standing there and just talking. It was very, very entertaining, very fascinating internet artifact. Okay, another white pill. Associated Press, Meta kills off misinformation tracking tool CrowdTangle despite pleas from researchers and journalists. I'm imagining the researchers and journalists as soy jacks and Mark Zuckerberg as the Chad. So here's the article. There's a couple here I want to read on this. One of them is just this AP one, and then one's a little analysis on it. So published August 14, 2024 from Barbara Ortute. She says, Facebook and Instagram parent Meta Platforms has shut down CrowdTangle, a tool widely used by researchers, watchdog organizations, and journalists to monitor social media posts, notably to track how misinformation spreads on the company's platforms. Wednesday's shutdown, which Meta announced earlier this year, has been protested by researchers and nonprofits. In May, dozens of groups, including the Center for Democracy and Technology, the Digital Forensic Research Lab at the Atlantic Council, Human Rights Watch, and NYU's Center for Social Media and Politics, which is like a who's who of the organizations that need to have tanks parked in their yard permanently. They sent a letter to the company asking that it keep the tool running through at least January so it would be available through the U.S. presidential elections. I wonder why they want that. Quote, the letter said, quote, this decision jeopardizes essential pre- and post-election oversight mechanisms and undermines Meta's transparency efforts during this critical period and at a time when social trust and digital democracy are alarmingly fragile. CrowdTangle, quote, has been an essential tool in helping researchers parse through the vast amount of information on the platform and identify harmful content and threats, it added. In March, the nonprofit Mozilla Foundation sent Meta a similar letter, asking it to keep the tool, which was available for free, functioning until January. That letter was also signed by several dozen groups and individual academic researchers. Quote, for years, CrowdTangle has represented an industry best practice for real-time platform transparency. It has become a lifeline for understanding how disinformation, hate speech, and voter suppression spread on Facebook, undermining civic discourse and democracy. Meta has released an alternative to CrowdTangle called the Meta Content Library, but access to it is limited to academic researchers and nonprofits, which excludes most news organizations. So it's limited to academic researchers and nonprofits. Up here has been protested by researchers and nonprofits. So they're shutting this thing down. They're being protested for doing so by researchers and nonprofits. And They're releasing an alternative that will be limited to researchers and nonprofits who are protesting the shutdown. But it excludes most news organizations. Interesting. Critics have also complained that it's not as useful as CrowdTangle, at least not yet. So they're taking it away from the news organizations. They're nerfing it, and they're paywalling it, and they're nerfing it. Nick Clegg, Meta's president of global affairs, said in a blog post last week that the company has been gathering feedback about Meta content library from, quote, hundreds of researchers in order to make it more user-friendly and help them find the data they need for their work. Meta said Wednesday that CrowdTangle doesn't provide a complete picture of what's happening on its platforms and said its new tools are more comprehensive. Meta acquired CrowdTangle in 2016. So another article on this from the Bureau of Investigative Journalism. I'll share this tab instead. Meta has pulled the plug on CrowdTangle. Here's what it means for users and for everyone else. The social media giant has received praise for supporting a vital transparency tool. Not anymore. Meta gets a lot of flack for the damage done by content on Instagram, Facebook, and WhatsApp, and rightly so. As we've covered extensively, disinformation and hate speech spread on the company's social platforms have caused huge real-world harm. But one thing Meta can and should be praised for is its support for one of the best transparency tools for investigating social media, CrowdTangle, a service it acquired in 2016. CrowdTangle allows researchers and investigators like us to see into Instagram and Facebook in a way that is far harder to do on other platforms. The monitoring tool allows us to search through public Facebook and Instagram content or see how particular pages and groups have grown over time. It has been integral to some of our investigations, including the series exposing misinformation during the pandemic. CrowdTangle is incredibly useful. In supporting it, Meta showed that it wasn't completely opposed to attempts to make its platforms less damaging for users and wider society. Imagine living in the world where you think that Meta is opposed to attempts to make its platforms less damaging for users and wider society, like from the perspective of a shitlib. These people are deranged. It was doing a much better job in this area than competitors such as TikTok and, since Elon Musk took over, X. No, X is the same. It's just the same. Unfortunately, Meta is now pulling the plug on CrowdTangle. The company insists everything is fine because it's providing a new and improved replacement, the Meta Content Library. But the rules around how this new service can be used make it virtually useless to journalists. For a start, access is open only to those affiliated with academic institutions or other non-university, not-for-profit organizations that, quote, hold scientific or public interest research as a primary purpose or core activity, end quote. That basically rules out commercial news organizations, and we're currently not sure whether nonprofit newsrooms like the Bureau of Investigative Journalism will qualify. I love how they frame themselves as nonprofits. Oh, we're just the little guys. We're nonprofit. We don't even make any profit. We're just the Bureau of Investigative Journalism. We're eating ramen and sitting on the floor. Please, please, help the little guy. Meanwhile, they're directly supported by billions and, maybe not billions, millions of dollars from billionaires. Even those organizations that are likely to qualify have faced major delays in getting approval to use the service. All the while, Meta has reduced support for CrowdTangle, making it regularly unusable. But the problems don't stop there. Those using the Meta Content Library aren't allowed to publish any personal data, only research outputs such as graphs and tables. That means any attempt to publish, for instance, the name of someone found through the library to have incited violence or spread dangerous misinformation is forbidden. Holding people to account for wrongdoing must be at the core of what journalists do. Translation: journalists need to be able to hunt people down and dox them and harass them. But if that wrongdoing is taking place on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, or WhatsApp, Meta is now helping perpetrators remain protected and hidden. Based! It is difficult to see the rules as anything other than an attempt to conceal harmful behavior on its platforms and to hamstring the journalists looking into it. This won't stop us. It will make our job harder and undoubtedly more expensive. But we will still ensure those using Meta's platforms to cause harm are exposed, while uncovering the company's role in enabling them. After today, no one will be giving Meta credit for offering more transparency than its peers, and no one will believe that Meta wants its platforms to work for their users and for wider society. It will just be another social media company concerned only about its bottom line. Cope and seethe, faggot. So another story here on media. Got a good thread here from a powerful mutual of mine, Shy Guy. Go follow him. I never heard of this guy, Warren Smith. So we're going to watch the video here on CNN's incredible response to Elon and Trump interview. And I like this guy's vibe. I like his production and everything. And then Shy Guy's got a great thread response to it. This is 8 minutes long, so we're going to speed it up a wee bit.
Watching CNN's response to the X Space last night with Elon Musk in a conversation with Donald Trump, it's truly remarkable.
It was supposed to start like at the top of the hour, wasn't it?
And the campaign is saying that Trump broke the internet. I'm going to show you a tweet here. This is obvious spin from Donald Trump's team.
No, okay, what we have to do in this conversation, we have to kill the narrative of the internet being broken.
Trump's co-campaign manager tried to put a positive spin on the situation, saying that Trump broke the internet.
Kamala Harris broke the internet when they had over 100,000 white women join a Zoom.
To kill the narrative that there was a DDoS attack.
Musk says he had been testing the servers ahead of time, trying to make sure this would work. We'll find out later what actually went wrong here.
Speaking of Brian Stelter, I just saw a tweet from him yesterday that he requested a press pass for a Trump rally or something like that and was denied. Bald douchebag.
Kill the narrative that this was a smart thing to do.
But their conversation on Musk's platform was plagued with technical problems that are overshadowing the interview itself, at least parts of it.
Because of Kamala's recent success, Trump.
It's kind of surreal watching just how flagrantly they're lying now. I mean, they've always been flagrantly lying. But with something like this, that literally hundreds of millions of people have consumed in some capacity at this point. And they're going to say, oh, it was overshadowed by technical difficulties. Nobody is talking or caring about the technical difficulties literally except for them. They're the only people on the planet who care about the technical difficulties. And they're trying to sell this narrative that it was overshadowed by these technical difficulties. Hundreds of millions of people literally experienced it and can watch this and be like, yeah, you're full of shit. They're not even trying anymore. This is just desperate flailing.
Trying to really pull out every tool in the box. And, he's out of desperation. He's doing this thing with Elon Musk.
I mean, I think the reason why Donald Trump actually came back to X was because of the virility and the viral moments that the vice president had around Brett and the coconut meme.
The effort here to try and play up the delay that occurred as some failure on Elon Musk's part.
But it is embarrassing for Trump because every day he's been attempting a reset lately to try to take on Harris.
Saying, come pay attention to me because I can't get you at my rally.
And them struggling with the rise of this alternative platform that's not CNN and it's not television. And we have to emphasize why good old television is the way to go.
This is why I love good old-fashioned television. It just works, everything actually works.
Well, and this is why I love television, because television, it just works. It's really interesting to see CNN try and they're like, well, I bet Elon wished he didn't fire all those technicians that worked at Twitter now.
This actually does show that streaming can struggle, especially when someone like Musk fired most of the technical staffers at the company formerly known as Twitter. You kind of had this coming.
Yes, there's going to be a lot of discussion around Elon Musk proposing this anti-regulation committee and wasteful spending. They compare this to the president of Argentina, where he came in and he's like, wasteful spending, fuega, or whatever, and just rip it off, and take a chainsaw to it. And that's what Elon did when he purchased Twitter.
God bless Elon Musk. You could have figured out the issues. If he was actually just paying attention, they would have realized that there are people who are engaging in this election in ways that they haven't engaged before.
I know I've harped a lot about deregulation and why I think deregulation is so important. And they discuss that at length in this conversation. It is what has allowed Elon recognizes that for someone like him who has the resources and has the ambition, has the dreams and the intelligence to execute plans like high-speed rails, but it is illegal due to regulation to even build one of those trains.
If year after year there are more laws and regulations passed and more regulatory bodies created, eventually everything will be illegal.
This is what motivated Elon to change his tune and to endorse him and to take the actions he's doing now, because Elon has been a victim of similar nonsense.
Musk had emphasized to the super PAC and to its leadership a desire for privacy. He'd been upset, I think, by previous reporting from you and your team that revealed he told people he planned to commit about $45 million a month to the group. He was asked about that at one point and said this.
At no point did I say that I was controlling put back on the endorsement. No, that was a fiction made up by the Wall Street Journal.
And as we see in this video, they are attacking him equally.
One of the things that we were watching closely to see how this played out when it came to Donald Trump sitting down with Elon Musk. Obviously, you have seen, the way we've all seen, Donald Trump really play into these various conservative, far right-wing conspiracy theories.
That headline there, this is just such a fascinating example of how they frame the narrative. Musk blames, quote, massive DDoS attack on X for delay in Trump interview. This is an editorial decision. It could also be massive DDoS attack on X delays Trump interview. That would be reporting the news. Or you could even say massive DDoS attack on X for delays Trump interview per Elon Musk, or per owner of the platform.
right-wing conspiracy theories.
They keep talking about these untruths. I don't understand. And the only example that they have given in the first half of this video, as far as an untruth, is speculation. I think that Trump speculated on Kamala Harris's photos of her rallies.
Both men have heavily trafficked in misinformation and conspiracy theories in recent years. Trump just yesterday making the false claim on social media that there were fake crowd pictures of Kamala Harris's Michigan rally last week.
He says that the crowds at Harris's event were AI generated.
It's like, that's the untruth you're so concerned about?
When Trump has been promoting a right-wing conspiracy theory about Harris's crowds, is it a good idea for him to do an interview with someone known to traffic in misinformation?
This is what will win Trump the election, more so than going to these campaign events, more so than anything that Trump actually says himself. It's the things that people will say in opposition to him. The more that you do this,
nailed it.
The more people are just going to say, well, to hell with it, I'm not putting up with this, and then they're going to push back even more. And that just escalates your opposition, and they don't seem to learn. Like, CNN does not seem to learn. They just keep doing it.
But just after the assassination attempt against Trump, Musk endorsed the former president, and Trump now has a different tune.
I respect Elon a lot. He respects me.
Musk has similarly repeatedly embraced false conspiracies, spread misinformation, and
when Trump has been promoting a right-wing conspiracy theory about Harris's crowds, is it a good idea for him to do an interview with someone known to traffic in misinformation?
When I watch things like this, I struggle to comprehend how that this is the baseline of intelligence. This is what I believe. It is easier. It seems to be just a law of nature that most people will always take the path of least resistance. It's almost like a law of physics. It is easier to be foolish than to be smart. It's just, there's less resistance. Therefore, most people will be foolish. But when I look at something like this, it's difficult for me to even comprehend that these are people that have lived full lives. They have been educated. They do this for a living. They genuinely seem to believe the words that are coming out of their mouths.
Elon Musk tries to present himself as an arbiter of the First Amendment, but that's not what this event tonight is going to be.
Elon Musk seems to have just begun to start his live stream with the former president. There's been a delay.
But then he went on to say that this was a giant server attack and that this shows how much opposition there is to even hearing Donald Trump speak, feeding into yet another conspiracy theory. I'm concerned every time Donald Trump is platformed. Elon Musk saying that part of this attack is because there's so much opposition to even hearing Donald Trump speak.
The white pill in this is she's saying the truth. She's saying it in a disbelieving way, but they're forced to report on the truth. They can't just not talk about it at all. They can't just freeze it out. They're forced to report the truth. They're reactive. They're reacting to the things that are being said by Trump and Elon and their network of affiliates. Those are the people who are driving the narrative. They are in control. Patriots are in control. The regime is reeling and reacting to them. Doesn't make them not dangerous. It actually makes them more dangerous. So this isn't just rest on your laurels. This is a message of get the fuck off your ass, no fucking blackpilling, and get to work.
So it is what it is, really. CNN, it is what it is.
This is not James Damore. His name's Warren Smith.
Watching CNN's response to the X-Space.
Quiet. Teacher, volunteer firefighter, and founder of the Secret Scholars on YouTube. This is the first I'd ever seen of him was this video here, so I followed him. It's at WTSmith17 on Twitter. I like the guy. I like the way I like his whole vibe, his presentation, his thoughtfulness. Happy to give him a follow. So, Shy Guy, at SCHEI Guy1 on Twitter, he says, I'd say this is a white pill, albeit one that has the possibility of becoming a black one. We are in the middle of a giant struggle over control over the narrative. 2016, media intentionally gave Trump more coverage because they thought it would benefit Hillary. Blows up enormously in their face and vowed to never let it happen again. 2020, they've updated their strategy and embedded themselves within social media and tech companies to censor any info they don't like. Hunter Biden laptop, January 6th, Floyd riots, COVID, complete media blackout on non-regime approved narratives. Big W for the regime. 2024, their candidate has dementia and dropped out for an unpopular HR lady. They've lost narrative control due to Elon buying Twitter and cannot execute the same 2020 plan, which will only cause them to escalate further. There's going to be a showdown or face a massive L. Nailed it. Go follow Shy Guy on Twitter. Another powerful mutual, Western Verve on Twitter. Very much worth the follow. There's got to dig through a little bit of the conversation here, but he has a great message for the Zoomers. Okay. Ed Krasenstein. Kamala Harris is brat, and brat is going to win her the election in November. Why? Because Gen Z is going to vote. Peachy Keenan said, Gen Z brats are still sponging off their poor parents who can barely afford groceries, and they want 4 more years of crushing inflation. Kamala Harris is the avocado toast candidate, a luxury belief your parents can't afford. And Isaac Young, don't know this guy, says, if their parents are struggling to afford groceries, how are the kids who undoubtedly have less assets, zero savings, and no property supposed to be able to? I get dunking on left Gen Z, but they're the class with least collective power right now. And this guy says, it fucking sucks being a Zoomer. I hate it. And he said, the original guy, Isaac Young, says, I can't ever seem to escape the feeling that I was born 40 years too late. So Western Verve jumps in and he says, Zoomers get to be in the prime of their lives when there will be unprecedented instability and opportunity. And they're like, boo-hoo, I wish I could go back to when they didn't put chemicals in the McDonald's. And he says, instability, yes. Opportunity, what are you on about? You're talking to a white straight man with low income and zero connections. And he replied and said, okay, get your money up and start making connections, fam. This guy says, how? Bowling alone. Church, clubs at colleges, gyms, shooting range clubs, Chamber of Commerce meetings. And Western Verve adds Toastmasters, local meetup groups, coffee shops, rec leagues, and game shops. And then, whoops, he has a thread here. He says, Zoomers are going to hate this, and I'm only taking the time to type this because I want better for them. But so much of life is going to be what you think it's going to be. Much of life is determined by your perception. If you view everything negatively, your life will be more negative. Positively, positive. But this isn't an advocacy for fake happiness or hope. This is an advocation to accept your destiny as a man. This also isn't to compare yourself to others. Oh, you think your life is bad? Imagine this, but in a concentration camp. At least you aren't starving to death in Africa. That perspective is true, but that's not the point here. You should choose a frame of looking at the world that is going to be helpful to you. This is the no fucking blackpilling message. You should choose a frame of looking at the world that is going to be helpful to you. Choose one that is going to benefit you. What's the benefit to imagining yourself living in a world of no opportunities? Imagine that. Like, there's no opportunities for me. Do you think you're going to find any opportunities then? If you go out looking for a unicorn and the tool you use to look for unicorns is the find everything except for unicorns tool, you're never going to find any unicorns. You have to believe the unicorns actually exist and use a tool that assumes the unicorns exist if you want to find the unicorns. What's the benefit of being a victim? Well, the benefit of being a victim, I'll add here, is that then you don't have to take responsibility. Then it's somebody else's fault. So you can experience a shitty life, you can be lazy, you could have a shitty attitude, and you can blame it on someone else so you could feel morally gratified in doing it. It's pathetic. Let's say in the hypothetical future, an opportunity comes in your path that requires you to be physically fit or have X amount of money or X skill. You'd have to be getting fit, getting money, or getting skills in order to take that opportunity. Now you can imagine you will never have opportunities. Boo-hoo, you were born too late. And forget becoming excellent, accomplishing things, expanding your world, and those opportunities will pass you by. You will, incorrectly, think nothing ever happens to or for me. The nothing ever happens bros are the embodiment of this perspective. The nothing ever happens bros, I think a lot of them I think most of them are sincere, but it's incredibly insidious. It is brain poison. You do not want to live in a world where you have a perspective that nothing ever happens. The downstream effects of that presupposition are catastrophic. Things are always happening. If nothing's happening to you, that's commentary on you. Things could have happened, but you didn't put yourself in a position for it to happen. That's on you. Conversely, if you act as if there are going to be opportunities and you prepare for opportunities, you will pounce into action as they present. Life is full of winning. So all this moping about boo-hoo, I'm a Zoomer, woe is me, is only going to guarantee that you have a sub-fulfilled life. Your potential will be unfulfilled. Opportunities will pass you by. It's wasteful. It's unhelpful. It hurts you. And I'm not saying that by thinking there are opportunities, you'll be rich or get a 10 out of 10 A10 girlfriend or whatever, but I can guarantee that you won't if you spend time moping or focusing on how you don't have opportunities or society is fake and gay or whatever. It's not that by having this positive outlook, you guarantee the 10 out of 10 outcome, but by having the negative outlook, you guarantee that you will never get the 10 out of 10 outcome or anything short of that. If you expand your thinking about and preparation for the future, the possibilities expand. If you imagine it sucks and think that it sucks and spend time online moping about how it sucks, your future potentials shrink. So if you want to have a better future, you should start mentally preparing yourself to do better, get better, and have better opportunities. Instability? Yeah. But instability brings loads of opportunity. Will you prepare for that? Will you be ready for opportunity? Mental framing is powerful, and how you frame how you think will determine how you act and thus determine outcomes. If you want to win, be a winner. Must start thinking of yourself as a winner so you can enthusiastically prepare yourself to win. I want you young guys to win. And he tagged some people to amplify. He says, if you need some inspiration, dive into some history. Look into great men who are in impossible situations. They never doomed, they never blackpilled. Some fought even to their own death. Embrace your life in the world as a man. Fight or die. No dooming. He tagged a couple other people. This guy says, accepting the fact that the life is harder now and the social mobility is reduced isn't a black pill. Measuring your worth by success when the above is true is a fool's errand. It's possible to live a good life and die a good death while poor. It's harder, and that's okay. Maximizing comfort and trying to be successful is dumb, and it's likely going to make you pursue a shit life. Find a hobby and get better at it. Find a craft that pays okay. Live simply and don't covet material. Have bonds to your community and maintain good friendships. I know a few folks who tried to get rich or to be the best at what they do. They sacrificed many other aspects of their lives. Some failed, some succeeded. Most shortened their life by a decade. I don't know that they're any happier than my other peers. While technically correct, what he's saying here, the fact that he feels compelled to give this response shows that he's demonstrating exactly what Western Verve is talking about here. If you hear this message and your automatic knee-jerk response is, no, we need to tear that message down a little bit. No, we need to discount that. No, there's actually a lot of bad stuff that could happen. You're dooming. This is dooming. This is blackpilling. It's not that you have to ignore the fact that there could be bad things. You have to recognize that it doesn't matter that there are bad things. There will always be bad things. No matter what time frame you live in, no matter where you live, there will always be bad things. And you will naturally rise or fall to the level that you choose to. The billionaire who loses 90% of his wealth is still going to be wealthy. But that would be a catastrophic thing to experience. Imagine the psychological effect of losing 90% of your wealth when 90% of your wealth means $100 million or $900 million. You're now someone who lost $900 million. That's really, really bad. But you're also still worth $100 million. The way that you look at it, the way that you choose to frame it to yourself will determine the world that you live in. You get to choose the world that you live in. Taylor Brown, what's up? You did join at a good time. Because we are winning. We're going to win. And all will be well. But it will only be well for those who choose to believe that it's possible. And they dedicate themselves to optimizing their own trajectory every day, no matter where they're at, no matter what their starting point is. They make sure that the next day is a little bit better than the last day. This is essential. We talked about hyperstition last week. I think it was last week. Maybe it was earlier this week. Talked about hyperstition. And Kate asked me, I can't remember her exact phrasing on it, but she asked me to weigh in on how you could, how to get Christians on board with this idea of manifesting a reality. And it's not that Christians need to get on board with this idea of hyperstition. It's that hyperstition is describing a thing that exists. It's a phenomenon that is a natural product of human behavior. It's what meme magic is. Manifestation, law of attraction, all these different things are attempts, hyperstition even, all of these things are attempts at identifying this phenomenon. And this phenomenon that human beings can will reality is a fundamental anthropological truth within Christianity. This is what we do as human beings. We will reality into being. This is what it means to be made in the image of God. The likeness of God is the process of perfecting that willing into reality to where you're in an infinite modeling process of modeling Christ, who is the perfect reality willer. He is the Logos. We are imperfect reality willers. So sometimes, many times, most of the time, when we will things into reality, the things we will into reality are evil. We are the ones who introduce evil into reality. We will it by directing our focus away from Christ. But we have the opportunity to participate in his life, to participate in his church here on earth, and perfect our reality-willing capacity, which is what deifies us. As St. Athanasius said, God became man so that man might become God. This is what that is. To will reality perfectly. And we are infinitely far away from it because God, we have an infinite God to whom we can be modeled. We can model ourselves, which means we can improve in this process infinitely. Which says, yes, men are co-creators with God. This is the definition of that. This is how we co-create. By setting our sights on the things that are beautiful and true and good and manifesting them in everything that we do. You have to believe those exist. And the great thing about evil is when people see evil, it makes them pursue the good. I've lost track of the number of stories I've been given by people who said the events of the last 4 to 8 years made it very, very clear to them that evil exists. And the natural follow-on from that realization was, if evil exists, then good must. When I see evil really clearly, I recognize it as the absence of the good, which makes me want to go find the good. God didn't make the world this way, we do. Rorschach. Aha. Very great character, Rorschach. So shout out to Western Verve. We're helping out the homies today. Go follow these guys. All right, I'm going to have to, seeing the time here, I'm going to have to dump a story out for next week. Tho Bishop did a thread on his favorite work by Murray Rothbard. He says, some of my favorite work by Murray Rothbard is his elite theory analysis. He's got a good thread on that, but I'm going to have to drop that one out of the stack for today, and we'll get back to it. The next one we're going to do here is this thread. Never seen this guy before. I don't know him. Apparently, I'm following him. Funny how that works. Larry Correa, Monster Hunter 45 on Twitter. He says it's author of In Defense of the Second Amendment, Son of the Black Sword, Monster Hunter International, Hard Magic, Dead Six, and the Age of Ravens series. I almost said the Age of Raisins. Yes, Tho is a great follow. He's a great friend. He's a good dude. One of the best of us. So Larry says, the thing where you're actually, I think there was some context to this story. So yeah, come back here. This person said, I can't believe Americans are trying to argue that their states are as culturally different as European countries. My fucking God, they're so egotistical. And he says, I've been to 5 European countries. I've been to 45 U.S. states. She's got no friggin' clue. Language, yes, though the Germans spoke better English than big chunks of America. Everything else, no. This guy says, U.S. states are nowhere near as culturally diverse as European countries. Where the hell did you go? England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. And Wales and Germany. I'm British. I've traveled to a few U.S. states in Canada and maybe a dozen countries in Europe. I now live in Europe. It's very different place to place. So Larry says, the thing where Europeans don't grasp how diverse America is makes me laugh. But anyways, I've been to England, France, Germany, Czechia, and Denmark. I've been to every U.S. state except Hawaii, Alaska, Maine, and the Dakotas. Other than speaking the same language, sorta, there's as much difference between San Francisco and Oklahoma City as there is between Prague and London. The difference between the South and everything else alone would blow your Euro mind. I say this with love as an adopted Alabaman. Then even in that one region of America, the difference between the groups is a hoot. Cajun is in the South, but it's its own thing. That's not even getting into the racial differences. Then you've got the rural versus urban divide that exists everywhere. Tennessee is wildly different from Mississippi. Both of them look at Virginia like WTF, while most of Virginia points to the north and says, don't blame us. Then there's Huntsville, where you can meet somebody who looks and sounds like a total redneck, but who does calculus in his head for fun. America has got a couple hundred subcultures with deep philosophical divides between them, which follow geographical and historical lines a lot more than they follow state borders. Then we've got the ethnic subcultures and their geographic enclaves in America, something which we've had since the beginning, which Europe is suddenly trying to deal with for the first time and not doing so hot. Hey, you smug Euro bastards who've been sneering at America's crime rate from your, what up until recently have been peaceful, homogenous oatmeal countries. Anybody who thinks every part of America is the same, that tells me they haven't gone very far off the freeway. Big chunks of America are culturally Latin, and there's big differences between being Mexican in Fresno and being Cuban in Miami, or culturally American black, and there's big differences between Atlanta and LA, or culturally Scandinavian, and tell a Youper that he's the same as a Minneapolis liberal and you're going to get stabbed. Or New Englanders. Hell, within the Boston city limits, there are more social divides than regular people can keep track of. Hell, I come from a place where you were either Portuguese, Mexican, or Okie, and the difference between those was the same as the difference between France and England, only in one valley. Now I live in the Intermountain West, as in cowboy country. You know those lists of rodeo kids where the names are so cowboy they go viral? Those are literally my neighbors. Which to me is normal, but to big chunks of America, it is so different and alien that they think Yellowstone is realistic. On that note, spare me the excuse about how us Americans all watch, listen, and read the same entertainment. Because A, only kinda, and B, you guys consume our entertainment products too. I got annoyed while I was in Europe trying to listen to European music at the rental car because most of your radio stations were playing boring American pop, which, again, is subdivided by those geographic cultural things I pointed out above, but is dominated by lame artificial LA crap mostly. And we consume your entertainment products. That's why I visited all those countries to cater to the European subcultures who like my books. Don't worry, most of the proper Europeans still hate my stuff. But back to my current region. There are huge cultural differences between Roughneck, Wyoming, and Mormon, Utah. Same region. Hell, same town half the time, wildly different cultures. And don't get me started on the progmo liberal Mormons of the super urbanized Wasatch Front, because they're all going to hell and the rest of us know it. But you Americans all eat the same food. Yeah, the national which turns out you guys have too. But again, get off the freeway a bit. Depending on the town, you can get some really good Vietnamese, Tex-Mex, or Somali. Same way the good food in London is Thai or Indian, and the traditional British food I ate was a friggin' war crime. Y'all need to treasure Gordon Ramsay for helping you fix your shit. People say America is like 50 countries in a trench coat. It's more like 200 countries bouncing on a trampoline. America is actually more like India, with its clumped together mixture of hundreds of groups reclumped again under a few umbrellas. Some U.S. states do have national pride or identities, but within those states, there are subcultures who don't and others who are all in. Texans and Floridians know exactly what I'm talking about. The one thing America and Europe have in common, all our sane normal people hate the big lefty cities which dominate us politically. So hundreds of subcultures clumping under two distinct umbrellas, us and those meddlesome fuckers. So culturally, the people of rural Idaho have more in common with French farmers who are spraying cow shit on government officials than they do with the liberal Californians who now infest Boise. There's another cultural difference between America and Europe. We move around a lot. Europeans had centuries to clump into their chosen regions, or invade one or get kicked out, so the like-minded could be born and die in the same spot. Most of the American subcultures are like, fuck it, I'm going to move 1,000 miles to a very different place and work there instead. And we do that constantly, so the whole construct is always shifting. Then, geographically, we win. Period. We've got a bunch of stuff Europe doesn't have while having everything Europe has except for fjords, maybe? I think. I'd have to check. Alaska might. Hell if I know. Ultimately, U.S. states are crazy diverse, and the difference between states is nuts. The further you get from the national chain shopping center right off the freeway off-ramp, the more apparent this becomes. The homogenous parts of America were the bits that we all agreed that we liked and adopted. Which, ironically, I saw the exact same thing driving across Europe, as I bought Kinder Bueno in every single country. I just really enjoyed that. I enjoy his writing style, and anything that comes off as proudly American shitting on the Europores is something I'm obligated contractually by having a social security number to amplify. I forgot I was going to highlight this comment here from Thomas Queries on the screen. He says, the leftist elite use CNN and MSNBC to crowdsource ideas. These people are all auditioning for roles, and that's exactly correct. Taylor Brown says, all you need to know about diversity in the South and Midwest is asking someone from Memphis about barbecue from Kansas City and someone from Kansas City about barbecue in Memphis. Or anyone in Texas about either of those. Grillers and meddlesome fuckers. Meme it. You guys know what to do. The grillers versus the meddlesome fuckers. It's funny, growing up on the West Coast, spending a lot of time traveling. I was privileged to be able to travel all across the U.S. and South America, or Central America, not South. Central America and Europe when I was in my teens. And I got a really good appreciation for just how wildly diverse all these different areas are, all the different people, the geography, the climate, the economy, the cultures, everything is wildly diverse. Whereas there are diversities within Europe, but you feel like you're in Europe. Like everything feels like you're in Europe when you're in Europe. Even going down to Turkey, it was still very European, very distinct. But we lived in Southern California for a while, and there was a bunch of even the friends we still have there, when they talk about coming out to Texas for a soccer match, the way they talk about it is hilarious. Like, to them, they're going to a foreign land. They think they're not safe. Like, they can't leave the cities or they're going to get shot or something. They're like driving through this little country town and everyone's staring at them. And it's like, well, yeah, because they don't see very many unfamiliar cars drive through. These are just down home, salt of the earth people. And these bougie libs from California can't fathom the idea of like crossing the country. They've never left the urban areas. You know, they go airport hopping, but they never actually go out into the country. They don't know it exists. That's why they fall for goofy propaganda like the world is overcrowded or there isn't enough space for people, which is just silly. Do one road trip across the United States and tell me that that there isn't enough space for everyone. All right. We've talked about this guy before. Both of these guys, actually. We got Base Beth Jesus in the house. He says, it's time to build the machines that build stuff. This is like, I don't know, Industry Act? Factory Act. That's what it is. Oh, that's good. Factory Act. It's time to build the machines that build stuff. 2112 Power, or Chris Power, and team are leading the charge of the American industrial renaissance. We need more of this, please. Chris Power has raised $180 million to manufacture metal parts at warp speeds at his California factory. Now he's got plans to build a network of them across the country to make more parts better, faster, and cheaper. # billion-dollar startups. Watch this. Oh, I didn't even realize there was a whole ass video in here. Let's see. Do we want to watch the video or read the article? Watch the video, read the article, watch the video, read the article. Let's just do both. I think we got time. Got to speed it up, though.
If you look at the shape of the last 30 years geopolitically, it's pretty obvious that what happens in the rise and fall of great nations is that step 1 is great success, step 2 is hard industrial power, step 3 is outsource all the hard industrial power to lower cost countries. Then step 4 is, because you did that, you lost what made the country powerful and strong in the first place. And eventually that comes home to roost.
You probably followed the stats that American manufacturing has actually declined in the past few years. It's actually stagnated. And I think that's because they just hit a wall. There is no real productivity leap. There is no supercharged fuel underneath that will allow them to continue to grow. The old processes that were invented in the 1900s, the mid-1900s, just are done. They just don't work. They've gotten out all they can get out of them, and now they've started to slide backwards.
Los Angeles-based Hadrian has raised $180 million in venture funding to build out software-enabled factories for high-precision machine parts for aerospace and defense companies.
It was a real cultural paradigm shift that we realized was, it's not about automating something because manufacturing people don't know what they're doing. It's just, how do you get the knowledge out of their head, systemize it, get it in software and automation? That's really the trick.
Hadrian's founder is Chris Power. He's a 33-year-old Australian immigrant.
Australia's the best place to grow up or retire. Very rarely does anything big happen there. So personally, it always felt like sitting at the kids' table at Christmas. It was pretty obvious that the US is kind of the last great democratic experiment. In the next 50 years, it will be decided whether the CCP rules the world or it continues to be like a Western-led American order.
Hadrian's big idea was to build its own software-enabled facilities, rather than selling software to existing ones.
We're a company full of slightly insane people that believe in something slightly greater than themselves. We work with basically startups who are trying to develop new technology, either for space, the DoD, or deep tech in general. Neoprimes, where they're starting to become these massive companies and need a lot of manufacturing support. So our job is to basically accelerate the new entrants while helping the legacy or massive entrants that are the pillars of this country's manufacturing base transform their operations with technology and services very, very, very quickly. their operations with technology, massive entrance.
Kind of a funny little touch here, having the googly eyes on the machine. It's like a really, really small thing, but it kind of says something about the culture of the place.
So the pillars of this country's manufacturing base transform their operations with technology and services very, very, very quickly. Most automation is built around a very defined product, and automotive is probably the best parallel. So you have a production line making X type of cars or variations of cars, and you build automation in a highly repeatable task of where you're going to do the same thing over and over and over again. It works really well even in like machining environment when you're going to make a small subset of parts at a high rate. Where it tends to break is in introducing a mass amount of variability, and that's what our system was designed to go ingest. And so both with how we set up our process as well as how the automation is built is to try and take mass ambiguity and break it down into a set of standardized functions or tasks to make it digestible, to make it effective, and to really kind of give us a lot more of that variability management that you would typically struggle with.
Chris Power first approached SpaceX employee Chris Baker back in 2021 with what seemed like a crazy idea.
Chris originally reached out when I was managing the machine shops at SpaceX and had this wild idea that he wanted to automate the work I was doing in that factory. At the time, it was an extremely chaotic environment and was proof to me that what he was trying to push was not going to work. I think you lose a lot of faith in the fact that this can be automated when you've been surrounded by the type of hardware that we have to manufacture and the amount of different variables, both like human and just physics-based problems that the space is surrounded with. And you lose a lot of trust that you can really get down into each and every variable, standardize it, and build a system that can be replicated without a ton of human intervention.
Despite his original skepticism, Baker decided to join Power at his startup named after the Roman emperor. Power, who is both relentless and charming, soon convinced investors to back his idea too.
Investing in Chris Power was a wonderful experience because he's one of those founders who's a true visionary, and he lights up, not just a room, but a whole market. He explains the need in terms of the supply going down, the demand going way up, in such a way that if you didn't know you needed it, now you know you needed it.
Chris's very first principles will challenge every aspect of anything you're saying cannot happen and really gets you to question kind of your underlying philosophy of why am I against this? What is holding me back? And so I think it's an extremely aggressively helpful way of approaching what we're going and building and what we're going and doing, because if you don't know at its core why it can't work, then you sure as hell better go figure it out.
So reminder again, I'll pause this partway through to get this back front of mind for you. I shared this tweet, I think it was yesterday, from Stormy Waters. Said that interview Trump did with Elon told you exactly which power factions are backing and protecting him. Trump kept bringing up how he's going to build a mega Iron Dome for America. That's Star Wars 2.0. This is just saying he wants to start building ultra high-tech sci-fi shit again on first day, Silicon Valley. And also missile defense and electronic warfare, which was whose priority again? Pentagon and Defense Corps. Trump said make USA a manufacturing superpower. Rapid onshoring of tech manufacturing was whose strategic initiative and beneficiary? Pentagon and Defense Corps. He said making U.S. world's largest energy producer, Texas oil money, and Wall Street. He said he plans on keeping the dollar the world reserve currency, i.e. world finance hegemon, Wall Street. There's more examples, but you get the idea. So what you're seeing here is touching on a bunch of these. Making the USA a manufacturing superpower. Missile defense and electronic warfare. Building ultra high-tech sci-fi shit. All of these things are all being represented in this Hadrian. And it's also overlapping very much with Silicon Valley. Coming from, he's coming up through the Silicon Valley world, supported by American Dynamism and 8VC and Lux Capital, and I think Sequoia might be in on it. And then you got the American Dynamism thing with Andreessen Horowitz, and then he poached a guy from SpaceX. This is the new military industrial complex, and you can see in the way that they're talking about things, the things they're focusing on, what sort of values that they have and what sort of values they don't have.
It's long been hard for manufacturers to find people who want to work there.
You've got millions and millions of high-skilled labor shortage that is going to get worse because people are retiring. So we could train 10,000, 100,000 people over the next couple of years. We can't train millions. So it's like, how are they 10x more effective with software and robotics? And then where is the pool of people that we can make manufacturing exciting for, give them a great career? One of our core mission statements is to make meaningful jobs for the American workforce, and I think it's like one of the things we've done the strongest at. Like the majority of the tour and interview process is held out on the floor around equipment, and a core element is seeing how they engage, what type of questions they ask, how interested they are in the specifics versus it just being a job or something to collect a paycheck.
The up talk is, you could tell where the guy is from.
It's really, where are the pools of people that have similar skills that we can draw from and bring them into this industry where there is high talent density? And that's, retail, hospitality, oil and gas, ex-military, nurses, really anybody who wants to, who is like able and willing to go. So we are down to a point where we can...
Oh, wow. There's a phenotype for you. This is the guy who's going to rebuild American industry, unironically.
So we are down to a point where we can train and onboard anybody in like 30 days. And the first part of that is using software and robotics to make it a lot less complicated. And the other part is training and workforce development to enable the new people coming in to be successful and grow as fast as they can grow.
Notice what the workforce is like there. Notice the demographics.
The variety of people we have here is really cool. We have really like super smart people and equally smart people without the experience, people who, this might be their first job.
Some of us have that context and have a little bit of mechanical engineering and manufacturing background. Most people really don't. And so when we try to bring them in here, we kind of tell them, hey, we're going to teach you all that. The thing that you need is to be interested.
When I joined,
the Hadrian shirt with I think that's the Top Gun, coloring and style.
Manufacturing, it was this dated thing that nobody wanted to be a part of, and I think we're building something that can change that dynamic. And so the entire kind of strength of the U.S. economy, the U.S. defense program, is built on the ability to go build things internal to the U.S., and I think we have the ability to go scale that, and we have the ability to get more people familiar and exposed in this environment and make them effective quickly.
Hadrian's revenue reached an estimated $3 million last year, its first year of commercial operations. This year, Power figures it will grow tenfold to at least $30 million. After that, he has big plans to open additional factories around the country.
So we invested in the summer of 2021, and the product was just being built at that time. So it has really gone from zero to exponential growth in that timeline. They've, not only brought their product to life, they've built a factory around it now, put those CNC machines on their software platform, and now have a wonderful set of customers, many of which are of course confidential, but are growing really well and have supercharged demand in that space.
In terms of where we were 2 years ago, or what we thought could have possibly happened, is blown our expectations out of the water, and the proof is really in what customers think and also just how efficiently we're operating. We are 300 to 400% more efficient on how we utilize our capital equipment. Usually machines run 20% of the time. We are running at 79%, 80%, so we can get more with less. Secondly, we are about 6 to 10x more efficient on a workforce productivity basis. It's been 4 years since Chris and I really started talking. And again, I started in this very, I can't believe you're trying to do that, good luck state. Today, we're about 100,000 square feet. It's a relative size of where we'll build our next factory. As we bolt on different capabilities or really look to grow the size of the hardware we support, this is kind of the playbook we're trying to go build out and define for those future factories. But the ambition of the company is truly going to scale with us. And so the amount of processes we support, what we're trying to do to really be a single source, is really going to stress what that playbook looks like as we grow.
We covered these guys several weeks ago. And I think it was in the article that I read on that episode that they described what they're doing is basically supply chain as a service, which is kind of an interesting thought.
The long-term vision is that we will do everything for everybody in core manufacturing for the US. Every 6 months or so, we roll out one of those new product lines to customers to expand the capability of what we can do. So ultimately, we will have 50 or so kind of very large facilities specialized in each of those areas, so customers can tap into any one of those services depending on what they're making. What all leaders should aspire to do is make yourself obsolete. I think the interesting thing about Hadrian is I have no line of sight or vision to being able to do that based on the ambition of scale and growth, how we develop the workforce, just the amount of challenges in front of us, both technically with people with just infrastructure in the country, is so impactful and large that I really don't know where the road ends. I think if we can look back in a decade, yes, we're financially successful, but the test that I want to see is a guy or a girl is 17, they're deciding on what to do, and they're bragging to their friend at a bar. They're they got a job in manufacturing, they're really excited about it, opposed to a software engineering job and a finance job. If we can make that cultural shift, that is the biggest thing, because everything is downstream from that.
Okay, so an article here from Forbes, I believe. Yeah, Forbes. It's going to address some of the stuff you guys are talking about here in the chat. Jay Ford said, I'd like to work with these guys. Don't know where I could start. I told him to hold that thought because we got some information coming here. The high-tech something. I don't remember exactly the title. It looks like the Zoom is killing. It's cutting it off. There we go. The high-tech factory makes parts for rockets and fighter jets 10x times faster. Hadrian founder and CEO Chris Power has raised $180 million to manufacture metal parts at warp speeds at his California factory. Now he's got plans to build a network of them across the country to make parts better, faster, and cheaper, from Amy Feldman. At Hadrian's Torrance, California factory, now just for those of you who are not Southern California familiar, let me do this real quick. We've talked about the Gundo boys before. Obviously, there's quite a bit of overlap here. And this is... So you got Southern California, which, incidentally, this is difficult to really, truly like comprehend and appreciate how massively vast this urban area is. We lived out here in Redlands, and we often drove in here to Culver City. And the drive from Culver City to Redlands, with no traffic, this would be probably 90 minutes at least. And with traffic, it would be like 3.5 hours. It is absolutely vast. And yet still, you could go right up here into the mountains, and it's super remote, beautiful, amazing countryside. Down here as well, you get down into Orange County, come all the way down to San Diego. But this is where Torrance is. And here's all the beach cities, super bougie. And then here's El Segundo, kind of like an industrial district right next to LAX. So they're in Torrance. This is El Segundo. Very close proximity to one another. At Hadrian's Torrance, California factory, the machines keep working after their operators go home. Swing by after hours and you'll see them, displays aglow as they crank out parts in the dark. Quote, "We're running 24/7. There's a crew of people during the day, and then it just runs itself," said Chris Power, Hadrian's 33-year-old founder and CEO. "That's what our software does for manufacturing." Power's vision is somewhat different from other startups building tech to make... I lost my spot here. To make other companies' factories more efficient. He's developed proprietary software to run Hadrian's own factory, which allows it to churn out all types of precision metal parts for aerospace, space, and defense companies faster, more efficiently, and with fewer people. Now he wants to build out a network of cookie-cutter high-tech machine shops across the country to shake up a giant and fragmented industry. That's a difficult and capital-intensive project, but one that Power argues is crucial for America's industrial base. Investors, including Andreessen Horowitz, ding, 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 Founders Fund, ding, 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 and Lux Capital, ding, 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 have bet $180 million on it, and the company is now worth roughly $500 million. While the 3-year-old business is still small, having just launched commercially in 2023, it's growing fast. It brought in $3 million in revenue last year, and Power expects to increase that number tenfold this year, reaching at least $30 million, as it ramps up production from its factory near Los Angeles. "I get bored of things going too slowly," he said. Those numbers helped Hadrian make the cut for this year's next billion-dollar startups list, Forbes' annual showcase of the 25 companies we think most likely to reach a billion-dollar valuation. There are huge risks to building a new high-tech manufacturing business. Metal parts that go in rockets or satellites need to be extremely precise, yet production quantities of each part are very limited. That's very different from automotive factories where manufacturers churn out standardized parts in vast quantities. As a result, many machine shops for such specialized parts have stayed small, despite the industry being as large as $50 billion. Hadrian currently produces thousands of parts each month, comprising hundreds of unique ones, Power said. "There is certainly an opportunity to improve the speed and efficiency with which parts are made," said John Hart, a professor of mechanical engineering at MIT and director of its Laboratory for Manufacturing and Productivity. That said, machining is still really complicated. Hadrian software is what enables its existing factory to make spaceflight-grade parts 10 times faster and more than 40% more efficiently than legacy manufacturers. That software allows Hadrian to take legacy designs or CAD files from customers and turn them into digital instructions to make finished parts. It also operates as a brain for the factory, letting it track and schedule jobs, and allows the machines to run on autopilot and be inspected autonomously. That permits Hadrian to produce parts at a speed that has its customers excited. This is a market where the delay in one small part can mess up an entire rocket launch or postpone delivery of a needed fighter jet. "I think we're just at the early innings of how to change the whole industrials market into a technology market," said Dana Grayson, co-founder of Construct Capital and investor in Hadrian and other manufacturing startups. Power said that the need for a more efficient machine shop is so great that Hadrian has been growing at rates of 20% or more each month, despite not having set up a sales team until this spring. Now he wants to build out additional factories, speeding towards his vision of a network of automated plants across the country that can, as he sees it, help the U.S. maintain its industrial power against China. If you want something made, we'll make it for you, higher quality, faster, and cheaper, Power said. Power grew up in Melbourne, Australia, a world away from Silicon Valley. A dropout of Monash University, he took a job with a retail firm called Retail Splash, worked at a few other startups, and then joined employee engagement software firm Ento as head of growth in 2015. He came to the United States in 2019, drawn by the bigger opportunities for someone with an entrepreneurial bent. By then, he'd developed some strong opinions about America's declining industrial base and how critical reversing that trend was with China rising. I'm a big student of history. I realized there was a huge geopolitical risk about to hit the U.S., said Power, whose bio on X identified him as, quote, industrialist, technologist, believer in hard power, and Pax Americana. After visiting a bunch of small, old-school machine shops run by workers in their 50s and 60s, he realized his fear of a decline in American industry was horribly right. He set up buying a small San Francisco-based investment firm called ADSC in July 2019 with the idea of buying up existing mid-sized firms in the aerospace and defense supply chain. ADSC raised approximately $650,000 from institutional funds of funds and wealthy individuals for acquisitions. But as the pandemic hit in 2020 and he continued to visit machine shops and small manufacturers, Power became convinced that trying to change existing companies wouldn't solve the problem he saw. So in 2021, Power started Hadrian, named for the Roman emperor's efforts to fix his civilization's crumbling infrastructure. The vast majority of investors in ADSC rolled their equity over to Hadrian, he said. He's an outsider, said Brandon Reeves, a partner at Lux Capital, who's been invested in Hadrian since its seed funding. He networked himself into Silicon Valley and became very plugged in. To bring his idea for an automated factory to life, Power reached out to Chris Baker, who previously managed machine shops for SpaceX. I thought it was truly impossible to get this thing and all the parameters figured out, Baker said. He was extremely tenacious, very pushy, and continued to engage with me even while I was telling him the thing he was trying to do was going to fail. After 6 months of talking, Power convinced Baker to join his startup as VP of Operations. Hadrian first set up a small 20,000 square foot plant, then Power realized he needed a larger factory and built out the existing 100,000 square foot factory in Torrance. The factory combines robots he bought from other companies like KUKA Robotic Arms with Hadrian's proprietary software system to manage operations. Imagine if you put Tesla Autopilot on an F1 car so you could drive it with 15 minutes of training, Power said. That's what our software does for manufacturing. To convince its first customers to trust a small VC-backed startup, Power lured two companies that are now major customers, that he declines to name, with a no-risk pitch. We basically said, hey, we're going to make a bunch of parts, but we're in beta test, he said. It may not work, but if it does work, we're going to be your best supplier. The fastest, cheapest, and best quality. Will you give us the data to run the factory in beta mode undercover for 2022 and 2023? Brilliant. The companies agreed to give them, and it's ballsy too. The companies agreed to give them plans for parts so Hadrian could test out its systems, and the startup spent the next 9 months making parts on its own dime. It took 9 months of running the factory and fighting fires every day to go from, we think the system works, to it actually works, Power said. We made probably $1 million worth of parts and destroyed them just to test the systems. In our industry, you cannot fail, so we had to test the factory running at full tilt. The ploy worked and the beta customers signed on. Since then, Hadrian has signed up some 30 customers, including top space companies, defense startups, and major defense companies, Power said. He declined to name any customers, citing confidentiality agreements. It's a very clandestine industry, he said. You don't say. RTX Ventures, the venture arm of RTX, the aerospace and defense giant formerly known as Raytheon Technologies, invested in Hadrian earlier this year. Daniel Atea, managing director of RTX Ventures, said that RTX is evaluating a number of parts that Hadrian could supply to it. From a national security perspective, these supply chain bottlenecks are really constraining, he said. We feel there's a lot of opportunity for Hadrian to eliminate the bottlenecks and constraints that currently exist. He declined to comment on which specific parts Hadrian might supply or which RTX products they might go into, but noted there's potential across RTX's business and in aerospace and defense more broadly. Catherine Boyle, a partner at Andreessen Horowitz, who we've talked about many times on the show here, she's the one who gave the original American Dynamism speech and has been talking about it a lot, who is invested in the company, said that Hadrian is on the radar of top Defense Department officials, many of whom have visited his factory. They understand that the defense industrial base is crucial, she said. This was a focal point for DoD long before it was talked about in Silicon Valley and in Torrance and in Los Angeles. The company employs just 170 workers, who it can train in 30 to 60 days to run its machines. Some of them run 10 machines at a time. All receive equity in the firm. Many of them have switched from other careers, including nursing and retail. That's a potential advantage at a time when manufacturers have struggled to find workers. We want to bring people into manufacturing who've never set foot inside a factory before, Power said. So there you go, boys. If you want to be a part of it, they'll train you in 30 to 60 days. You get equity in the firm, and people are switching from nursing and retail to it. You don't have a manufacturing background. In fact, they prefer that you don't. Witt says, of course, this guy's Australian. They don't trust China at all. Yeah, right. He has big plans for the future, like building out a network of automated factories across the country as fast as possible. A must, he believes, to position America to win in the competition with China. He's already looking for a location for the next factory, perhaps in Texas, Arizona, or Virginia, which he expects to open in 2025. That facility will be larger than the Torrance one, potentially 3 times the size, with the capacity to produce $200 million in revenue, he said. Chris is pushing for an insane amount of speed, VP of Operations Baker said. The rollout accelerates after next year. Starting in 2026, Power is aiming for 2 or 3 new factories a year, a pace he figures is doable because the software and factory setup will be the same. Factories 2 through N are rinse and repeat, said investor Reeves. Speed is hard in a complex capital-intensive business like manufacturing, but Power sees a window now. He figures that either the U.S. continues to outsource its manufacturing to low-cost countries, or it figures out how to use automation to enable factories in the U.S. to compete. He knows which side he wants to be on. Where are they located? They are in Torrance, California, LA area, but expanding soon, coming to a city near you. All right, catching up on some of the comments. Any questions? No. Okay. All right. Got one last story here, and then we're going to wrap up the week with some something nice and wholesome. This is actually, I was going to say it's a total, complete departure from what we were just talking about, but there's actually kind of an interesting parallel. So this guy here, Marcel Foti, ancient mysteries researcher, inventor of the Natron theory, working on the from stone to stone cycle to create artificial stone with caveman materials only. So if you're a fan of theories about the Giza Plateau and the pyramids and how they were built, this is one of the most interesting theories that I've seen. He says, suddenly I gained another 500 followers, so for their sake, I'll briefly summarize what the game is all about here. It seems we're going to rewrite the first few chapters of human history. What started as, let's figure out how the unfinished obelisk in Aswan was made, has evolved in a direction where we can now confidently say the past didn't happen the way we thought. Our ancestors were apparently capable of chemically altering stones, dissolving them, and then reassembling them. The evidence for this is that countless others besides me have done this, and it works, and it's not even hard to do. Unfortunately, there's no need for UFOs or ancient advanced civilizations to transport stone blocks of, say, 20 to 25 tons, or, God forbid, 1,000 tons. They weren't hauling the stone blocks around, but just the raw material, in buckets. The megalithic structures are masonry works, just that the mortar is a completely different material than what we use today. What could it be? First act. When I started to decipher the secret of the Aswan unfinished obelisk, I naturally had no intention of rewriting the early history of humanity. This realization came later. The mystery of the unfinished obelisk lies in the mysterious scoop marks, approximately 50 by 50 centimeter indentations, which look as though someone gouged out the granite with a giant ice cream scoop. So this is granite. This is not sand. This isn't soft dirt or anything. This is granite. But it's got these weird scoop marks all over this quarry. The official explanation is completely wrong. I won't even go into that. It's nonsense. However, my umpteenth experiment was successful, and indeed, I was able to etch this supposedly indestructible granite with simple tools in my own backyard. All it took was a grill chimney starter, some charcoal, and natron. As it turned out, modern humanity, of course, knows that molten natron dissolves granite, or more accurately, quartz, and this is used in several industrial processes, from pottery, cracking glazes, to recycling rare metals, liberating metals from circuit boards. It's just that archaeologists didn't know, which I have no problem with other than the fact that they know now but still ignore the facts. Second act. Now that we've successfully etched the granite, let's see what material is produced in the chemical reaction, because maybe our ancestors could use it for something, considering they didn't know the concept of waste. What could this white stone foam be good for? As it turns out, the white stone foam is nothing but water glass, Na2SiO3. This is fascinating because water glass is one of the main components of modern geopolymers. What do our ancestors do if they get their hands on a material with which they can make stone? They make stone with it. And here we reach the point of rewriting history. All those civilizations that were able to produce water glass were obviously capable of casting new stones from water glass. The simple form of this, when ash is mixed into water glass, results in a beautiful black Inca stone. The source of the ash matters. It needs to have a significant aluminum content. Such sources include pine trees, tobacco, cannabis, etc. In short, there's a way to make those ancient, ugly black and gray stones, and of course, many have already tried and succeeded. The giant stone blocks of Inca walls fit so precisely together that not even a piece of paper can be slipped between them because they were simply cast next to each other directly into the wall. Third act. Where did the Incas get their natron for all this? The place is called Salinas de Maras, a mountainous salt evaporation site where locals have been performing salt evaporation for millennia. Not surprisingly, Salinas de Maras is at the epicenter of all megalithic Inca construction sites. From there, they transported the natron in all directions. An interesting question is, if the Incas figured this out, did other peoples come to the same realization? And the answer is yes. I've mapped out and found worldwide that there are gigantic stoneworks, where there are gigantic stoneworks, whether carving a mountain or a huge structure made from a single piece of stone, Petra, Jordan, or a bunch of rock temples in India, there's always an unlimited source of natron nearby, without exception. Eventually, I began searching for natron sources next to the megalithic structures with the casual confidence of Neo dodging bullets in the Matrix because I could see everything even with my eyes closed. I even made a custom Google map showing these connections. Fourth act. What makes this all the more interesting is that if a more advanced civilization encountered the same relationship, water glass plus ash equals stone, like the Egyptians, they might try to create prettier, not just black stones. They just need to find a material similar to ash but with a high aluminum content in powdered form. Modern geopolymer manufacturers use metakaolin for this purpose, which is nothing but burnt calcinated clay. What a coincidence, this material is also found in Egypt, right next to Aswan in the desert, and only there. Is it conceivable that the Egyptians tried to use burnt kaolinite for stone formation? This is not only conceivable, but it would be offensive to the ancient Egyptians if we did not assume this about them. So they tried it. And what did they get? Artificial granite. Or, more accurately, a stone eerily similar to granite but based on aluminum silicate instead of quartz, which is extremely difficult to distinguish from granite without very expensive instruments. I admit artificial granite has not yet been created in my lab. However, since this possibility fits seamlessly into the already proven story and additionally explains a lot of unexplainable ancient achievements, it's probably true. Source, me. So here we are. I'm currently working on creating artificial granite, or more accurately, a hard stone that looks like granite using purely ancient methods. And once that's done, we can start rewriting the history books. Here you can find the whole story unfolding. So I just want to show you guys his website here. The Natron Theory. Once upon a time, there was a desert, and in this desert, where logically nothing should happen, here humanity made its most important steps in development. Now, I do reject the premise here that when the pyramids were built, it was a desert. I think it very obviously was not, but hey, let's play along. In the beginning, there was natron. Natron is a kind of salt which is abundant in the Nile Valley. People have been hand-picking and collecting it in baskets since ancient times. Ancient Egyptians used natron for at least 10 different purposes. Washing clothes, drying food, medical treatment, mouthwashing, ceramics, textile dyeing, insecticide, conserve papyrus, cosmetic, and mummification, of course. Oh, and one more thing. Natron was also used to create glass. So-called natron glass, which is still the most common format of glass we use today. In fact, this happened way before the Egyptians even dreamed of having an empire. Between 5000 and 4000 BC, they already created small glass amulets and glass beads. The Badarian culture. What is glass and why is it important? Natron glass is nothing more than natron, sand, and limestone cooked together on 851 degrees Celsius, which means Egyptians were able to melt natron since the beginning of time. It's a so-called fact. Now tell me straight to my face, are you seriously saying that normal, healthy ancient men didn't try melting stones with molten natron but only bothered with sand? Which one should I click? Let's say, nope, they didn't. What happens? It won't let you. Well played. And what did they find? They found a bunch of dominoes that can be knocked over. Dominoes like granite being so hard that it can't be damaged by any everyday chemical, or how our ancestors transported stone blocks weighing several hundred tons over hundreds of miles. Start domino effect. The first domino, the granite mistake. Granite, which has a hardness of 7 on the Mohs scale, is so hard that no acid or alkali can harm it. Our ancestors had to use copper chisels and stone tools to carve granite. Wrong! Many different chemicals can damage granite, and among them there is also an acid. Hydrofluoric acid? Yeah, for the sake of completeness, there is an acid that etches granite, but hydrofluoric acid is nearly impossible to store because it corrodes everything, including glass, ceramics, and metals. Moreover, it is highly toxic. We don't believe our ancestors were handling this acid. They have used something else. Natron. There's another substance mentioned before, sodium carbonate, or natron in short, a white powder which, when heated to 851 degrees Celsius, eats granite for breakfast. And here we could recap the list we've already seen of the various uses the Egyptians had for natron. They knew this material very well, not like in our modern times. How is etching granite possible? The essence of the matter is that granite is a complex material with 70 to 77% of it being silicon dioxide, or commonly known as quartz. The rest are tiny, colorful granite, feldspar grains. Molten sodium carbonate, natron, breaks down quartz, and so granite as well, liberating the tiny, colorful grains. This is a piece of red granite after a good bath in molten natron. What is molten natron? It's a liquid. At 851 degrees, it turns into a glowing, corrosive, reddish liquid from its fine white powder form. Reaching a temperature of 851 degrees Celsius is quite easy with the help of charcoal. The natron doesn't etch the stone in this video, but only because the heat dissipates immediately. Don't be impatient. As you've seen, all you need is a grill chimney and some charcoal to be able to etch granite at home. Additionally, you'll need some kind of container to put your stone and natron in. This could be an empty tin can. This setup retains the necessary heat for the natron to stay molten and do its work. And no, this is not how ancient Egyptians did this. Molten natron also etches all other volcanic rocks with quartz as their binding material. Without claiming to be exhaustive, it also etches these rocks: sandstone, volcanic tuff, diorite, quartzite, and basalt. Which means if you can work on granite with molten natron, you can also work on these stone types as well. It's a total misconception to believe that granite is some kind of invulnerable sacred substance. It's just like any other material in our surroundings. It has its own enemies. It's time to topple the second domino. The scoop marks mystery. Look at the size of this frickin' obelisk with the people on it. The unfinished obelisk is a massive 40 meters long, 1,100-ton granite block whose carving was inexplicably halted by our ancestors. This has provided us a great opportunity for us to examine how they work. It's certain that they didn't do it in the way a modern person would. There are all sorts of strange processing marks around the obelisk, and the famous diorite pounding stones, of course. Around the unfinished obelisks, on the obelisk itself, and next to it in the trench, you can find distinctive depressions known as scoop marks. According to the official explanation, these were created by diligent individuals using diorite pounding stones to carve them deeper and deeper. What's wrong with this explanation? It has several issues. Not only is it incredibly difficult work, but in some places, like under the obelisk, it's downright impossible. Secondly, it's entirely illogical to create nearly perfectly square depressions when one could make significant progress by simply knocking off the ridges. In fact, crushing the ridges would be the solution for this hard carving problem. The natron theory states that our ancestors weren't foolish. They didn't start carving granite with pounding stones if they knew that using molten natron made the work much easier. Once they had worked the surface with natron, carving became child's play. They could definitely have used their pounding stones after etching the surface. In fact, that would have been a completely logical step because they had to crush and remove the residue before a second round of etching. What does the theory predict? According to the theory, these depressions served the purpose of melting natron on the surface of the granite, since molten natron is a liquid and the edges were necessary to prevent it from spreading all over the area. But how to heat the granite surface? The challenge in heating the granite surface is that the heat dissipates. How did the Egyptians solve this problem? The Tomb of Rekhmire. There's a certain wall painting in the Metropolitan Museum known as the Tomb of Rekhmire that depicts metal smelting. But if you spend some time analyzing the picture, you realize this is the most idiotic way of doing any metal work. Let's see what these guys are actually doing. Melting iron on the floor? Let's start with the upper left part. Here, two people are clearly sharpening fire with some tool on the floor. I gotta actually not get in the full picture. There we go. The problem with this is that the floor, like any large stone surface, almost sucks the heat out from underneath the tool. Not only is there a problem with what these good people will do if the metal accidentally melts on the floor, but also with the fact that they're deliberately making the work process more difficult by doing it in a challenging surface, reducing their chances of success. Not to mention that what lurks beneath the embers doesn't even look like metal or ore. The tool at their feet is fairly easy to identify. It's a bellows equipped with strings. The strings are used because prior to the discovery of iron, there were no springs. So instead of springs, strings are used to reset the bellows to their original position after being stepped on. In the pile, since the men are heating the floor, it's natron. They are using molten natron to etch the granite floor. Let's zoom this out even more. Okay, barely read it now. There's no evidence for this because there's no description accompanying the wall painting. If we say it's just a story, it's a much higher quality story anyway than the official version about metal smelting. Producing water glass. If this story alone isn't convincing enough, let's take a different perspective. The Natron theory suggests that at the site of the unfinished obelisk and in various places around the world where scoop marks are found, Stonehenge, Peru, Sardinia, etc., the primary goal wasn't actually stone carving. After all, etching doesn't allow for precise cutting surfaces. Carving was just a secondary aspect. The real activity in all these locations was the production of water glass itself. And the end product was not the obelisk, but the water glass. Let's recap what we know so far. Molten natron etches quartz, consequently granite. Etching granite produces water glass. Okay, what the heck is water glass? The very thing that makes the third domino fall. What is water glass? This substance is again a white powder with the chemical formula Na2SiO3, and it's produced within natron. It's produced when natron breaks down the quartz in the given material. It extracts the silicon from the stone and assimilates it. It eats quartz for breakfast while it belches out CO2. Dry water glass dissolves excellently in water where it breaks down into sodium ions and silicate ions. In this form, it serves as an excellent paper adhesive. But if it encounters metal oxides, it shows its real strength. It stimulates them to form crystals. If you drop different materials into water glass solution, you'll get the colorful underwater glass forest. It petrifies them. Did someone say stone? If we look more closely at what else water glass is good for, we quickly realize its real potential. We have only known since the 1970s that water glass can be used to create a substance similar to but harder than concrete, and that doesn't require cement. Moreover, the material can be successfully used in 3D printers, allowing us to print houses with it. That's should be familiar to you, those of you who watched the show over the last couple days. The collective name for these materials is geopolymer. If we look at ancient stone structures, we could find a million examples where our ancestors somehow softened the stones and worked with them like children playing with clay. They bent the stones, pressed their hands into them, carved them with knives, or even molded a clumsy little monkey into them. In the bottom right corner, it's evident that someone carved out the puma, but the little monkeys look like they're from a different material. Is this still? Website's a little janky. Artificial stone. And what a surprise. This is exactly how you can work with water glass-based artificial stones, the geopolymers. After mixing, they're just like Play-Doh. An hour later, they start to harden but can still be cut with a knife. After a day, they become hard as rock. But why is it black? Water glass is white, right? Let's be lazy and try to add the material that's already piling up as waste since we've melted the stone with fire. Wood ash. It says wood ash adds the necessary aluminum oxide to the mixture. However, not all ash contains aluminum oxide. For instance, hardwoods do not. The best wood ash comes from stone pine. Nomen est omen. Also, not every source of aluminum is black. For example, metakaolin used in modern geopolymers is snow white, therefore not every artificial stone is black. Let's call this ash-based stone, Stone 3.0. We'll see why later. Let's add some water. You get the Play-Doh above. And after 24 hours, you have an artificial stone. Or your own Excalibur. Bingo. Any proof of ancient water glass use? Returning to the original mural, we could see a white pile of something accumulating in the background. That something is contaminated with black specks. Of course, it's contaminated because it's mixed with the remaining charcoal. Then this white substance is carried around in bags, poured out, and someone molds a wall out of it. All this is depicted in a single mural of smelting metal. If all of this is true, it'd be really funny to learn that it's all been out there and like available to see and know about for a long time. Every ancient civilization with access to Natron knew how to make water glass. We see evidence of this everywhere, scoop marks. And undoubtedly, they had access to wood ash. The question is whether they tried to mix the two. If they did, they could have created artificial stone. Let's recap what we know so far. Molten natron etches quartz, consequently granite. Etching granite produces water glass. Water glass is the main component of geopolymers. So we'll topple the fourth domino. How to transport giant stone blocks. Abu Simbel. We have a great example showing how modern man is capable of transporting ancient multi-ton sandstone colossi carved from a single stone from point A to B. This occurred during the construction of the Aswan Dam, where several ancient Egyptian temples and giant statues had to be saved from flooding. In 1963, professionals transported 2 stone temples and these massive single stone statues to a new place at Abu Simbel. The technology used was as followed. They lifted the temple and the statues with heavy machinery and helicopters. Oh, wait, no. They actually cut them into 807 pieces. 807 pieces. Modern man doesn't have any other technology to move these 100-ton statues other than cutting them up and moving them piece by piece. This is exactly what happened at Abu Simbel. How did ancient Egyptians do it? Well, there's a wall painting where we see the Egyptians dragging a huge statue on a wooden sledge across the sand. One person is pouring water in front of the sledge onto the sand to facilitate sliding. It's certain that this method works. You could drag it all the way to a ship, and you could take the statue as far as you want by boat. Let's count the number of people pulling the statue. There are 2 times 21 equals 42 people standing along each rope. There are 4 parallel ropes, making a total of 168 people. Assuming that one person can drag, say, 100 kilograms on the sand, this statue could have been approximately 16.8 tons. 168 person equals 16.8 tons. The Serapeum. In Saqqara, there's a place called the Serapeum where underground caverns house giant stone sarcophagi, each weighing 40 tons, made from noble stones such as granite, basalt, and diorite. As we just saw, one person can drag approximately 100 kilograms. Therefore, to drag such a sarcophagus, 400 people would be needed. Even if one person could drag 10 times more, 1 ton, it would still require 40 people on this narrow space. If we discard both the UFO and the Harry Potter theories, we don't have many choices left to explain this, but did someone say buckets? However, there's an additional possibility for how all this could have been done. If the Egyptians knew about artificial stones, they could have brought the raw materials easily into the tunnel in buckets and cast the sarcophagi on site. So either they didn't move these 40-ton boxes around at all, or they did it with buckets, depending on your perspective. But we will need a substance instead of wood ash because Egyptian statues are not all black. We need some white material that can do the same as wood ash. That is, it contains freely available aluminum oxide. To crack this nut, let's review what modern geopolymers or artificial stones are made of. 1. Water glass. Check. The Egyptians knew how to make water glass. 2. Alkali activation. Check. Wood ash juice is a strong lye, which was also used for soap making. Metakaolin, the most needed white material that turns water glass into stone. Metakaolin is a silly name for burnt or calcinated kaolinite. Kaolinite, on the other hand, is a white mineral which is the residue of, wait for it, granite. Granite that has decomposed over millions of years. So kaolinite is essentially disintegrated ancient granite. Water glass needs freely accessible aluminum oxide to turn into stone, which can be found in kaolinite, and the burning process disintegrates it into white powder. Where can we find kaolinite in Egypt? Surprise! Where else, and actually nowhere else, but in Aswan, where the unfinished obelisk is located. Obviously. We find surface kaolinite fields only a few kilometers from Aswan in the western desert. It's surely a fatal coincidence that the only place in Egypt where you can find kaolinite is where Egyptians started etching granite to produce water glass. Aswan is that divine place in Egypt where all the raw materials for making white geopolymer are within arm's reach. Unproven theory, yet. Granite can be recast from the water glass produced by etching granite with molten natron using metakaolin from the western desert and mixing in the remaining original granite grains. Let's recap what we know so far. Molten natron etches quartz, consequently granite. Etching granite produces water glass. Water glass is the main component of geopolymers. Kaolinite is million years old decomposed granite, and to get white geopolymer, you need burnt kaolinite. Fifth domino coming. Okay. So we've run to the end of the line here. So that's all that they've got so far. I think this is really fascinating theory. I still think that there was probably other stuff that went into a lot of the megalithic architecture, and I definitely don't discount some ancient technology capacities, but I think he's definitely onto something, and these things aren't mutually exclusive. So if you want to keep up with what he's doing, you could go to natrontheory.com, and does he have like he has a geopolymer calculator? Oh yeah, there's some interesting stuff here. A geopolymer calculator, kind of similar to the thing we were just reading in terms of format. And then a Natron map, the world you never imagined to exist. So he's got a bunch of different locations: ancient Peru, Indian pairs, a bunch of places where there's where Natron is. So natrontheory.com if you want to go dig into it more yourself. And then you can follow him on Twitter at Fomahun. That's Fomahun. Marcel Foti is his name. All right, very last thing for the day. Little something wholesome to end the week on. I don't know if this is going to get the. There's a very good chance that this is posted on YouTube, and YouTube is going to identify it as streaming something that's already on YouTube, and they may suspend the stream, but that's okay. We're right at the end anyways. If that happens, you can go finish watching it on X, where we're live streaming right now, and it may, if you're listening to this later on after the stream is up, I may end up having to chop it out to be able to keep the stream. We'll see. Maybe it'll stay there. Hopefully. Either way, here is some high culture for you guys, and I'm not saying this ironically. An Ode to Joy rendition. It's the Hans Sachs Choir and Nuremberg Philharmonic performing Beethoven's Ninth Finale flash mob style at the Church of St. Lorenz. Make sure it's on 1X. All right. Enjoy, you guys. We are going to take back orchestra culture from the shit libs. It's ours. We are going to claim it. Straight Buster says, and that's what I call civilized society. Indeed. One of my favorite parts in the whole thing is I played cello in high school, so I get all this gets me all excited. And one of these here, there's one note here. If you watch the cellos, they play this open G string, which I like saying just because G string. But it's just the sound just pops. You can hear the it's just super resonant. It's right here. I think I was a little bit too far ahead. Right there. You hear that? Anyways, wife just got home. She needs me to help her unload the milk order. So I appreciate you guys. Hope you have a great weekend. I'll catch you guys on Monday. We'll be back with another episode of the Astrolabe. Do me a favor and hit the like button on your way out. And follow me on Twitter at RealKingPilled. Subscribe to the channel and do all that good stuff. And join the King Pill Discord, kingpill.com.